Chapter 873. A year passed by in the blink of an eye. During this time, Han Shuo had been staying in Tanai Pandemonium. He had been working with the 5 elite zombies to set up the Pandemonium and meditating on the differences in his new realm. After entering the Skybreak realm, Han Shuo could clearly feel the changes in his body. Every strand of demonic yuan in his body was much stronger than before. It gave Han Shuo an indescribable sense of satisfaction. In this new realm, Han Shuo's invincible omen body was finally nearing completion. No matter how sudden the attack was, the invincible omen body would be able to protect his body in a timely manner. When there was no danger, his demonic body would remain relaxed and wouldn't waste any magical yuan. What delighted Han Shuo the most was that not only could the invincible omen body proactively defend against attacks, it could also generate the power to counterattack. No matter who it was, as long as they wanted to harm him, they would face the power of the invincible omen body's counterattack. Han Shuo experimented on Romont, who had a relatively stronger body. Han Shuo sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, meditating and not thinking about anything else. He calmed his mind and gave Romont the opportunity to attack. Romont approached and suddenly attacked Han Shuo. When his ferocious attack landed on Han Shuo's body, an overwhelming force erupted from Han Shuo's body. Romont was sent flying by the rebounding force. His eardrums were ringing, and he saw stars. As Han Shuo couldn't estimate the force of the counterattack, he didn't dare to go too deep and let Romont attack with all his might. But judging from the fact that Romont didn't dare to attack again after using the invincible omen body, Han Shuo reckoned that the force of the counterattack was not small. From this point of view, after reaching the Skybreak realm, not only did Han Shuo's state of mind and strength improve tremendously, he had also reached the mastery level of the invincible omen body. In the future, even if Han Shuo didn't have to be vigilant, he wouldn't have to worry about any sneak attacks. Anyone who dared to harm him, as long as they were weak, would fall into a trap of their own making and might even lose their lives in vain. During the year, Han Shuo spent his time laying out the Pandemonium. The 5 elite zombies added many deadly demonic formations to the Pandemonium. Perhaps it was due to Han Shuo's influence, or perhaps the 5 elite zombies had gained some enlightenment while laying out demonic formations, but all of them made breakthroughs and were on the verge of becoming high gods. The 5 elite zombies were different from others. Due to the unique energy within their bodies and the fact that they could form the Penta-Elemental Undead Formation, the Penta-Elemental Undead Formation would become even more terrifying as long as their strength increased. Every time the 5 made a breakthrough, it meant that the power of the Penta-Elemental Undead Formation would increase several-fold. After a year, the 5 elite zombies stayed in the Pandemonium and focused on stabilizing their realm. They had made the breakthrough from mid-stage mid-god to late-stage mid-god, hoping to advance even further and possess even greater power. In Tanai, the elemental energy between heaven and earth was denser than anywhere else. Rose and the others had benefited tremendously. Many of the gods cultivating in the Pandemonium had gained new insights into the mysteries of energy and made breakthroughs in their realms. The concentration of elemental energy in the Pandemonium was dozens of times higher than anywhere else. Not only did the elemental energy in the Pandemonium increase the rate of elemental energy gathering, but they could also sense the changes in themselves. Even Rose seemed to be on the verge of a breakthrough. She stayed in the gymnasium for months at a time. Other than the 5 elite zombies, Rose had spent the longest time with Han Shuo. She had experienced many battles and battles. Every time she faced death, Rose would have a clearer understanding of herself. After such a long time, she finally felt the calling of a new realm. She was preparing to enter the late-stage high god realm. During that year, news about Han Shuo had been circulating in every region of the fringe. Anyone who talked about Han Shuo would speak with reverence. They regarded Han Shuo as an existence on par with the 5 sovereigns. Some youngsters even idolized Han Shuo. Many of those with decent strength even went to the Pandemonium to follow Han Shuo. Han Shuo left the management of the fringe to Zovik and Goran. If there were extraordinary talents and clean identities, Han Shuo would let them stay. After all, Han Shuo had planned to make a big splash in the fringe, and he needed more manpower to handle all kinds of emergencies. Other than Han Shuo, There was another person who had made a name for himself in the fringe this year, Little Skull Han Hao. Salas had been missing ever since he left the pandemonium. No one knew where he had gone. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. No one had seen him in the fringe for a year. Even his most loyal subordinates had not received any news about Salas. There were many rumors about Salas' disappearance. Some said that he was hiding in an unknown region to recover his energy. Others said that he was afraid of Han Shuo and had left the fringe. There were many rumors about Salas, but none of them could be verified. Salas had disappeared without a trace. His subordinates were disheartened and could no longer act as they pleased in the fringe. Salas's subordinates had suffered greatly in the past year. Some powerful enemies who had misgivings about Salas had taken advantage of Salas after Salas had fallen from power to force them into hiding. As for Han Shuo, he was the most frightening person to be chased by. He wasn't motivated by hatred, but by the wealth Salas had left behind. Leading a group of god hunters, Han Hao wreaked havoc in the fringe. Many of Salas's subordinates were killed by Han Hao's men. Most of the wealth Salas had left behind fell into Han Hao's hands. Other than Han Hao, the other 4 sovereigns were also drooling over the wealth Salas had left behind. They had also dispatched their subordinates to target Han Hao's wealth. However, it seemed that the subordinates of the other 4 sovereigns weren't as capable as Han Hao. Their gains couldn't be compared to Han Hao's. The subordinates of the sovereigns were all domineering and ruthless people in the fringe. However, it seemed that they had received some sort of order. None of them attacked Han Hao, who had suddenly risen to power. They allowed Han Hao to compete with them for Salas's wealth, but did not kill Han Hao. They maintained a tacit understanding of not interfering with each other's business. None of the other 4 sovereigns in the fringe were easy to deal with. Although they did not know the true relationship between Han Hao and Han Shuo, after some investigation, they knew that Han Hao and Han Shuo had a close relationship because the energy they used was very similar in some aspects. Just this alone was enough. Therefore, the 4 sovereigns had tacitly instructed their subordinates not to get into a conflict with Han Hao over Salas. Naturally, they weren't worried about Han Hao, who had recently shown off his abilities, but Han Shuo, who had forced Salas into hiding. Han Hao seemed to know what the 4 sovereigns were thinking. He would not deliberately provoke or get into a conflict with the subordinates of the 4 sovereigns. When he encountered Asura's subordinates, Han Hao would be very friendly and even share some of the profits with them. To Han Hao, although he wasn't in Tanai, he had long regarded the pandemonium as his home. In any case, Asura had protected the pandemonium. Not only did Han Shuo feel indebted to him, but even Han Hao, who had not entered the pandemonium, had a favorable impression of Asura. He was willing to share some of the profits with Asura's subordinates. A year later, at the checkpoint of the Omphalos at the center of the fringe, Han Shuo was leisurely walking towards the checkpoint. The checkpoint was guarded by one of Logue's subordinates. It was obvious that he did not recognize Han Shuo. When Han Shuo arrived, the guard coldly shouted, "Pay the black crystal coins." Han Shuo looked at the guard with interest. His smile was as gentle as ever, but his words sounded rather arrogant. "My apologies, but I will not pay a single black crystal coin in Tanai in the future." Upon hearing those words, the mid-stage high god who cultivated in the energy of water put on a cold face. With a wave of his hand, a group of divine guards surrounded Han Shuo with malicious intentions. "Do you have a death wish?" shouted the guard coldly and blocked Han Shuo's path. It seemed that he was ready to attack Han Shuo. "Let Logue come and collect black crystal coins from me." "You people are not qualified to do so," replied Han Shuo with the same smile on his face. He was not the least bit enraged. He merely felt that these guards were indeed discerning. "You are courting death. How dare you address Lord Logue by his name?" The guard's face jolted. He shouted, "I don't care who he is, kill him. He has not entered the Omphalos, so he is not breaking the rules." It was obvious that these subordinates of Logue did not recognize Han Shuo. They did not treat Han Shuo as a big shot. In their minds, anyone who entered the Omphalos would have to pay black crystal coins, except for the 5 sovereigns. These people knew the 5 sovereigns very well, and they did not think much of it. All they wanted was to protect the dignity of Sovereign Logue. "You people are really courting death. You should know that the fringe is no longer the same as before. Other than the 5 sovereigns, there is another person that you absolutely cannot afford to offend. Even if Logue were to come personally, I think he would still let Brian enter the Omphalos courteously. At this moment, a chuckle came from the Omphalos as Haralai slowly walked out. Logue's subordinates did not know who Han Shua was, but they knew that Haralai was a well-known leader in the fringe. The leader was rather surprised to hear Han Shua's words. Then, he suddenly recalled someone and his face turned pale. He looked at Han Shua in awe and asked, "Are you Mr. Brian?" Han Shua smiled and did not answer his question. Instead, he asked, "I would like to know if you still dare to accept my black crystal coins." "Of course not." The guard's face was filled with fear. He hastily explained, "Our Lord has instructed that you are free to do whatever you want in the fringe. Our Lord will not interfere." Han Shua chuckled and nodded. He said, "That's good then." After that, he leisurely walked into the Omphalos without even looking at the guard. Logue's subordinates stepped aside to make way for him. Their movements were respectful and their faces were filled with awe. Chapter 874. That was how it worked in the fringe. Whoever's fist was harder would have the final say. If it wasn't Han Shua, but someone else who dared to be so arrogant as to refuse to pay the entrance fee, Logue's guards would have mercilessly slaughtered that person. They wouldn't even give Han Shua a chance to enter the Omphalos. But when he recognized Han Shua's identity, his attitude immediately changed. He knew that a person who could defeat Salus was not someone they could afford to offend. Even their master, Logue, would not want to offend Han Shua at this point in time. Therefore, they immediately put down their arrogance and respectfully made way for Han Shua. Han Shua knew that the rules in the Pandemonium were determined by strength. He was not worried that Logue's subordinates would have any ill intentions against him. He walked into the Omphalos as though there was no one else around. Haralai followed closely behind Han Shua. He seemed hesitant as though he had something to say but did not know how to start. When Haralai's subordinates looked at Han Shua again, their faces were filled with reverence. They were even more respectful to Han Shua than they were to Haralai. They secretly observed Haralai, hoping that their leader would be able to point them in the right direction. "Hurry up and say it. We have already missed our chance last time. We can't afford to miss it again this time." Haralai's subordinates were secretly anxious. They signaled Haralai with their eyes, urging him to speak as soon as possible. Haralai was in a dilemma. He did not know if this was the right time to speak. After hesitating for a moment, Haralai finally made up his mind. He suddenly raised his voice and said, "Mr. Brian." Han Shua was stunned. He looked at Haralai with a puzzled expression and asked with a smile, "What is it?" A year ago in the Omphalos, you asked me to follow you. I told you that I would think about it." "Haha, do you still remember that?" Haralai put on a fawning smile and appeared cautious. Han Shua was stunned. As though he did not know what Haralai was talking about, he put on a warm smile and asked, "Is that true?" "It's at Luolong's checkpoint. Do you have any recollection of it after you killed Buzz?" Haralai said with a forced smile. Back at Luolong's checkpoint, the penta-elemental undead formation of the 5 elite zombies annihilated many forces. It was also at that time that Goran killed Buzz and joined Han Shua's side. After that, Han Shua asked Haralai if he was interested in following him. Haralai hesitated for a moment and said that he would consider it. With Han Shua's memory, he naturally wouldn't forget what had happened a year ago. He was just purposely making things difficult for him. When Han Shua and the 5 elite zombies first arrived at the Omphalos, Han Shua had boldly asked Haralai if he was interested in following him. Haralai had decisively rejected Han Shua's offer and even mocked Han Shua, saying that Han Shua was courting death and would be killed by Buzz sooner or later. The second time Han Shua asked was after he had proven his strength. At that time, Haralai did not immediately agree to it, but gave the excuse that he needed to consider waiting. Now that he had defeated Salus, the news of his formidable strength had spread across the fringe. Haralai had taken the initiative to come to him and express his goodwill, asking to follow him. "Sorry, I don't remember much." Han Shua shook his head and ignored Haralai. It was hard for a man of such influence to be sincere. With Han Shua's current status in the fringe, he wouldn't have to worry about recruiting subordinates. Haralai was no longer a threat to him. Watching Han Shua leave, Haralai looked dejected. Of course, he knew that Han Shua would never forget what happened a year ago. Han Shua's explanation clearly showed that he looked down on him and resented his snobbish ways, which was why he refused to follow him. "My lord, what should we do?" "Sigh, if I had known this would happen, I would have agreed to it. There are too many people who want to follow him now. Our faction isn't the strongest in the fringe, and we won't stand a chance in the future." Haralai's subordinate sighed in regret. What's so great about that?" Haralai's face was filled with anger after being rejected. He's not the only powerful expert in the fringe. He just took advantage of the fact that Salus had exhausted too much of his divine energy after the battle with Asura. "Given my status in the fringe, I can survive even without following him." Haralai was obviously trying to make himself look good. Having been rejected by Han Shua in front of so many of his subordinates, Haralai harbored a grudge against Han Shua. Therefore, he was trying to regain his dignity by saying such harsh words. If he wasn't that powerful, why would you choose to follow him? Haralai's subordinates' eyes flickered. They secretly despised Haralai's words, but none of them dared to voice it out. In their eyes, Haralai obviously lacked foresight. If Haralai could understand the situation and decisively agreed to follow Han Shua a year ago, they wouldn't be in this situation today. Haralai was short-sighted and did not dare to admit it. Instead, he harbored hatred and even thought of revenge. In the eyes of Haralai's subordinates, Haralai was digging his own grave. Han Shua did not take Haralai seriously at all. He walked past the omphalos and stopped thinking about it. After entering the omphalos, Han Shua stopped a random person and asked smilingly, "Excuse me, where are the 10 sovereign shops owned by Sovereign Salus?" Salus, ever since he disappeared without a trace, his 10 sovereign king shops have been temporarily taken over by the other 4 sovereigns. Sovereign Tyre has 4 sovereign shops, and the other 3 sovereigns have 2 sovereign shops each. Now, even the direct subordinates of Sovereign Tanai and Salus have to pay black crystal coins to enter the sovereign shops. Haha, the situation has changed. Han Shua was stunned. He thought that Tyre, Asura, and the others were really quick to act. They had already taken over all the sovereign shops owned by Salus. It seemed that if Han Shua wanted to get his hands on those sovereign shops, he would have to rob them. Han Shua hesitated. He wondered if he should seize the sovereign shops from the other sovereigns. After thinking for a moment, Han Shua gave up on the idea. Han Shua, who had just entered the Skybreak realm, was confident that he could defeat any one of the other sovereigns. However, if the other sovereigns were to gang up on him, Han Shua did not think that he could handle them all. This was especially true for Tyre, who was said to possess unfathomable strength. Before Han Shua had seen Tyre in person, he did not want to take the risk of making everyone his enemy. After thinking for a moment, Han Shua decided to take the long view and take them down one by one. Han Shua did not waste any more time talking to the sovereign shop that Asura had ceded to him. Ever since Asura handed the sovereign shop to Han Shua had turned it into a shop for his Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. The pharmacist from Ethereal City had provided the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy with enough medicines to sell. However, as Han Shua had been busy with the pandemonium, he did not have time to personally refine the medicines for sale. Therefore, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy's business wasn't particularly flourishing. The reason why the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy was so popular in other cities was that Han Shua's medicines were unimaginable. However, some of the medicines sold in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy could be bought in other shops. There was nothing special about them. Naturally, those who came to the omphalos would not sell their medicines. In Tanai, there were all kinds of poisons and pharmacists everywhere. After coming to the fringe, these crazed pharmacists, who were not accepted by the 12 divine dominions, focused their research on extremely vicious and exaggerated pharmaceutics. Each and every one of them was a genius in this field. The medicines they refined were far more bizarre and had a wider range of uses than the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Since the fringe did not forbid such research, it naturally did not forbid others from using their medicines. Without the medicines refined by Han Shua, The medicines refined by ordinary pharmacists could not be compared to the medicines refined by the sovereign shops. If it wasn't for the fact that the sovereign shops did not have to pay exorbitant taxes, they might not even have survived. When Han Shuo arrived at the sovereign shop, he discovered that although the sovereign shop was large and had a dazzling array of medicines on sale, there were only a few customers. It was obvious that the goods here were not as attractive as those in other shops. Power, wealth, and status were indispensable. In the fringe, these were the basic requirements to ensure that a faction would be stronger than others. Since Han Shuo was planning to establish a foothold in the fringe, he had to take care of all the necessary resources. Han Shuo's arrival made the pharmacists extremely excited. They had heard that Han Shuo had defeated Salus, and they were full of admiration for the mighty sovereign shop. Han Shuo didn't say much to these pharmacists. He entered the material warehouse as soon as he arrived and picked out all sorts of rare herbs that could be used to refine pills. After notifying the pharmacists, he entered a secluded training field to refine all sorts of pills. Stalk after stalk of medicinal herbs were placed into the 9 tessellation cauldron. Strands of demonic yuan flowed through the veined patterns of the 9 tessellation cauldron. Balls of scorching flames gently lifted the 9 tessellation cauldron. The aroma of medicines gradually spread. Han Shuo, who was holding his breath and concentrating on refining medicines, skillfully used his newfound energy to grind the medicinal herbs and knead the energy contained within them together. He suddenly discovered that after attaining Skybreak Realm, not only did his strength and state of mind improve, even his efficiency in refining medicines had improved. Originally, it would have taken him a month or 2 to refine medicines. Now, he only needed a few days. Not only did the quality of the medicines not decrease, their medicinal efficacy was even better. In addition, Han Shuo, who had put all his attention on refining medicines, discovered that his demonic yuan was flowing smoothly and steadily. He could even feel the gradual increase in demonic yuan. This made Han Shuo realize that as long as he could truly calm his heart and cultivate, his demonic yuan would grow at a much faster rate than before. 10 days later, a total of more than 2,000 medicines were successfully refined. The medicines refined by Han Shuo were as smooth as pearls. They shone with a beautiful luster and emitted a rich fragrance that refreshed the mind. Master, there are many people outside who want to buy medicines. They have all smelled the fragrance of the medicines. Also, many pharmacists from the fringe have rushed over, requesting to see you. A pharmacist hurried in and reported to Han Shuo, who had just completed his task. Just in time. Han Shuo laughed heartily and walked out of the pill refining room. Chapter 875. After attaining the Skybreak Realm in demonic arts, not only did Han Shuo's pelletization speed increase, even the medicinal efficacy of the pelletized pellets was much better than before. Wisps of refreshing medicinal fragrance wafted out of the celestial pearl pharmacy. Many gods in the vicinity smelled the fragrance and came over to ask around. They had all heard that Han Shuo was refining medicine. These people were well informed. Many of them had learned about the miraculous medicines refined by Han Shuo from the other dominions. As soon as they heard that the one refining the medicines in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy was Han Shuo, they swarmed over, wanting to be the first to buy the medicines in Han Shuo's hands. In the fringe, there were all kinds of poisoners who had delved into the field of evil and developed some horrifying poisons. However, almost all of these poisons were used to harm others. There were none that could improve one's cultivation. However, the medicines refined by Han Shuo were different. According to the information from the 12 dominions, most of the medicines refined by Han Shuo were for his own use. Not only could they speed up the recovery of injuries, they could also stabilize the user's state of mind during cultivation and help the user comprehend the mysteries of energy faster. To many, this kind of medicine was what they lacked the most. Therefore, when they heard that Han Shuo was refining medicines, they rushed over from all over the fringe with sufficient black crystal coins in hand in hopes of exchanging them for medicines from Han Shuo. These people were all fiends from all over the fringe. However, when they gathered in front of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, they were all very friendly. Not a single one of them dared to barge into the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. They knew that in addition to being a genius pharmacist, Han Shuo was also a top-notch expert with terrifying strength and ruthless methods. In the territory of such an expert, they tried their best to restrain themselves and their subordinates, afraid that they would incur Han Shuo's displeasure. When Han Shuo walked out of the secret chamber, he noticed that there were many people gathered in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy shop. When they saw Han Shuo, they cautiously walked towards him. Each and every one of them had a respectful and friendly attitude, indicating that they intended to purchase his medicines. Han Shuo himself did not expect that these people would come after smelling the aroma. However, it wasn't a bad thing for him. He immediately raised his voice and announced, "Those medicines will be sold according to the market price. However, only a portion will be taken out every day. In the future, whoever comes first will get to buy first." Han Shuo had been handling the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy for a long time. From Phoebe and Emily, Han Shuo had learned some methods to raise the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy reputation. Given Han Shuo's current reputation in the fringe, no one dared to say anything. After giving his instructions, Han Shuo distributed the medicines he personally refined to his subordinates who were in charge of placing the medicines. He left the crowd. Many of the poison pharmacists who came to the fringe wore strange expressions. They wanted to say something but dared not. After watching Han Shuo leave, one of them groaned in a low voice, "What's so great about him? I don't believe that these medicines are that miraculous." That's right. If he had the strength to defeat Salus, there's no way he could have reached a high level in the field of pharmaceutics. Humph, if it wasn't for his strength, I would definitely compete with him to see who's better at refining medicines. Another person said indignantly. Every single one of these fringe dwellers was proud and arrogant. When they saw that so many people had rushed into their Celestial Pearl Pharmacy right after Han Shuo had started refining medicines, they were naturally displeased that their business was greatly affected. However, with Han Shuo's strength, no matter how resentful these poisoners were, they dared not say anything in front of Han Shuo, much less cause trouble for the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Let's buy some of those medicines and see if they have the same effect. Humph, even if he's strong, we can still tell the truth if the medicines are fake. One of the poison pharmacists suggested. The poison pharmacists who came to the fringe also agreed. These poison pharmacists who specialized in special fields were all very eccentric. If they weren't afraid that Han Shuo would kill them, they might have started to nitpick. Although Han Shuo had left, his senses still covered the entire Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. He heard every word of the poison pharmacists. With a smile on his face, he summoned a shop assistant and said, "If those poison pharmacists want to buy the medicines, we can sell them even if they can't get in the queue." "Why? Those fellas are obviously here to cause trouble. My lord, you might not know this, but when you weren't in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, they would often badmouth us, saying that the medicines we refine are nothing special," the shop assistant said angrily. He seemed to have a very bad impression of those poison pharmacists. Back when Han Shuo wasn't in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, nor did he defeat Salus to prove his terrifying strength, these poison pharmacists were not afraid of Han Shuo. They secretly slandered the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, greatly affecting the Celestial Pearl's business. Although Han Shuo didn't know much about them, he immediately guessed their intentions after hearing the shop assistant's words. He put on a faint smile and did not explain too much. He instructed, "I understand. Just do as I say." Hee. Although these fellas are eccentric, they are still quite capable in the field of pharmaceutics. I'd like to see if they can find any clues when they bring my medicines back. After hearing Han Shuo's words, the shop assistant did not waste any more time and retreated with a mind full of doubts. After the shop assistant left, Han Shuo chuckled and mumbled to himself, "The headquarters of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy will be in the fringe. Every single one of those pharmacists is a genius. I'd like to see which one of you can escape from my grasp." Han Shuo had been eyeing those poison pharmacists for a long time. He planned to recruit all of them. Even if those poison pharmacists didn't show up, Han Shuo would have taken the initiative to deal with them. Han Shuo was determined to make them work for the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. "Mr. Brian, long time no see." A chuckle sounded from outside. Moments later, Luolong, who was with Asura, walked in. The reason why Brian came to the secret chamber was because he was waiting for Luolong's visit. Han Shuo had sensed Luolong's arrival the moment he finished refining the pellets. Luolong was so loyal to Asura that he must have come to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy on behalf of Asura. Han Shuo wanted to hear what Luolong had to say. "Oh, it's you, Luolong. What brings you here?" Han Shuo said to Luolong warmly after letting out a long laugh. Luolong put on a flattered face as though he did not expect that Han Shuo would treat him as casually as before. In his opinion, Han Shuo, who had defeated Salus, was now on an equal footing with the five sovereigns. Han Shuo's way of doing things should be different from before, and Han Shuo wouldn't treat him the way he used to. Therefore, Luolong intended to treat Han Shuo the same way he treated Asura. However, before Luolong could show his respect, he was surprised to find that Han Shuo was as friendly and easygoing as before. Luolong found it very strange. "I have been instructed by Lord Asura to come and inform you." Luolong smiled and explained in a respectful tone, "Salus has disappeared without a trace. The 10 sovereign shops under his control have all been divided up. You weren't in the Omphalos at that time, so you didn't get any benefits. Lord Asura believes that you are now strong enough to take control of the Omphalos. Recently, he has been negotiating with the other sovereigns, hoping that the other 3 sovereigns will cede some of their profits to you, so that you can replace Salus in the Omphalos. However, it's not an easy matter, and there hasn't been any progress." Han Shuo looked at Luolong smilingly and nodded. "Luolong, please thank Lord Asura for me." "Haha, I really don't know what else I can do for him to help me so much. I came here to tell you that Lord Asura is going to give you the 2 sovereign shops we acquired. Well, they belong to Salus anyway. Lord Asura believes that you are strong enough to replace Salus in the Omphalos. If you want to establish a foothold in the Omphalos, you have to have something in your hands," said Luolong smilingly. Han Shuo was stunned. He did not expect that Asura would be willing to pay so much just to build a good relationship with him. In Han Shuo's eyes, Salus's belongings should belong to him after he left. It was not Han Shuo's style not to take advantage of an opportunity. Han Shuo was overjoyed. He hastily said, "Thank you so much, Asura." "Haha, I really don't know how to thank him. What is this Asura trying to do? Is he going to continue using me as a tool?" Han Shuo put on a smiling face, but he was cursing in his mind. There are hundreds of thousands of shops in the Omphalos. If you want to establish a foothold in the Omphalos, you will need the approval of the sovereigns and at least half of the shop owners. Only when these 2 conditions are met can you become the new owner of the Omphalos. Lord Asura sent me here to tell you this, reminded Luolong. Han Shuo nodded smilingly and said, "Thank you. I know what to do. Hee. I don't think the shop owners will have any objections. As long as I can convince the other 3 sovereigns, there shouldn't be any problems." Those shop owners who were loyal to Tanai did not possess any formidable strength. It would be a miracle if they dared to resist a fiendish Han Shuo. But after hearing Luolong's words, Han Shuo realized that there must be something fishy going on. The other 3 sovereigns might have instructed the shop owners to oppose him. That way, the other 3 sovereigns could avoid offending Han Shuo immediately and also prevent Han Shuo from entering the Omphalos for the time being. The shop owners of the Omphalos were all in the Omphalos. If Han Shuo decided to attack the shop owners, he would be making an enemy of the 4 sovereigns of the Omphalos. That way, Tyre, Log, and Wasis could at least find an excuse to deal with Han Shuo. Han Shuo had a rough idea of what the other sovereigns were thinking. He sneered in his mind and tried to think of a way to deal with them. Chapter 876. While Han Shuo was making a name for himself in the Fringe, the Han family in the City of Shadows, far away in the Darkness Dominion, ran into trouble. After Han Shuo disappeared from the City of Shadows, the members of the Han family gradually retreated to Fort Lossberg. The Han family kept a low profile in Fort Lossberg and no longer meddled in the affairs of the City of Shadows. Wallace, the city lord of the City of Shadows, had tacitly allowed the Han family to leave the city. He did not inform the Han family of any major or minor affairs in the City of Shadows. It was clear that he had excluded the Han family from any power structure in the City of Shadows. As the Fringe was too far away from the City of Shadows, it was very difficult for news from the Fringe to reach the City of Shadows. The ferocious gods from the 12 Dominions would travel to the Fringe to bring the latest news from the 12 Dominions when they had nowhere else to go. However, those Fringe dwellers who entered the Fringe rarely returned to the 12 Dominions. As a result, there were more Fringe dwellers than Fringe dwellers. As a result, news of the Fringe rarely spread to the 12 Dominions as quickly as possible. The latest news that Phoebe, Emily, and the others from the Han family was that Han Shuo had left Ethereal City. They had no idea what happened after that, much less what happened in the Fringe. Not only the Han family, but even Wallace, the City Lord of the City of Shadows, knew nothing about Han Shuo's situation in the Fringe. From their point of view, Han Shuo had suddenly disappeared without a trace, and no one knew when he would return to the City of Shadows. With Han Shuo's many miraculous feats in the City of Shadows, for the sake of the House of Saints' position in the City of Shadows, Wallace started to weaken the Han family. However, as Wallace knew that the Han family was on good terms with Andre, Erebus, Aobashi, and the others, and was concerned about Han Shuo's strength, he did not dare to go too far. Phoebe and Emily's decision to transfer the Han family's forces to Fort Lossberg was exactly what Wallace wanted. He turned a blind eye and ordered all the House of Han's forces in the City of Shadows to be transferred to Lossberg. He even allowed those from the 5th Corps who were personally trained by Han Shuo to leave. Fort Lossberg was located at the border of the City of Shadows. From Wallace's point of view, moving the Han family there shouldn't cause him any trouble. As long as the Han family did not expand their influence in the City of Shadows, Wallace would not take any action against the Han family. He was happy to see the Han family keep a low profile. However, back when Han Shuo was in the City of Shadows, he had offended far too many people. For example, Hoff's Hushvale City was located very close to Fort Lossberg. After several years of investigations, Hoffs had learned that it was Han Shuo and Rose who had wreaked havoc in Hushvale City. Through his investigations, Hoffs discovered that Wallace seemed to have deliberately alienated the Han family. Hoffs, who had been searching for Han Shuo for revenge, had shifted his attention to the Han family in Fort Lossberg after failing to find any trace of Han Shuo. He planned to start with the Han family. Other than Hoffs, there was another person who was eyeing Fort Lossberg covetously. It was Larrickson of the House of Broadhurst from the City of Gorging Clouds in the Darkness Dominion. Larrickson had suffered greatly at the hands of Han Shuo. Not only did Han Shuo kill a few high gods of his family, but even his son was killed before he could marry Donna. Over the years, Larrickson had discovered that the culprit was Han Shuo. With so much hatred, Larrickson had no intention of sparing Han Shuo and the Han family. The House of Broadhurst was the most powerful force in the Darkness Dominion, the City of Gorging Clouds. Larrickson was a greater threat to Fort Lossberg than Hoffs. Larrickson and Hoffs had the same goal. They soon came to an agreement to deal with the Han family in Fort Lossberg. Hushvale City and Fort Lossberg were very close to each other. Larrickson and the experts he brought from the City of Gorging Clouds were confident that they could destroy Fort Lossberg. In Hushvale City, Hoffs and Larrickson were sitting in the City Lord's residence. Hoffs put on a gloomy face and said, "Lord Larrickson, with your help, we will be even more assured of success. However, Fort Lossberg is, after all, the territory of the City of Shadows. If we attack Fort Lossberg by force, won't Wallace attack us?" Hoffs and Larrickson had been plotting for a long time. The two were confident that they had the strength to annihilate the Han family in Fort Lossberg. The only threat they had now was not the Han family, but Wallace, the City Lord of the City of Shadows. No matter what, Fort Lossberg belonged to the City of Shadows. If they were to invade Fort Lossberg and attack the House of Han, it would be a provocation to the City of Shadows. This could very well lead to a war between cities. The overgods of the Darkness Dominion would not be happy to see that happen. Larrickson's eyes were filled with hatred. He said in a low voice, "You don't have to worry about that. Just attack Fort Lossberg. Wallace won't interfere." Humph. Given the status and power of my House of Broadhurst in the Darkness Dominion, Wallace won't make an enemy out of us just because of a puny Han family. Hoffs was overjoyed to hear those words. He cried out in surprise, "You mean Wallace has already..." Larrickson nodded affirmatively and said, "Don't worry, I have already communicated with Wallace. He will pretend that he doesn't know anything about it. At most, he will reprimand us. He won't fight us to the death over a puny Han family." Hee. The existence of the Han family has already affected the status of the House of Saint in the City of Shadows. I think the destruction of the Han family is exactly what Wallace would like to see. That's great. Hoffs heaved a sigh of relief. He put on a sinister smile and said, "All right then, let's move." "All right, gather your men. We will head to Fort Lossberg. The Han family in the fort won't be able to withstand our attack. This time, we will wipe them all out in one fell swoop," said Larrickson viciously. "There's still Brian. When the Han family is destroyed, no matter where he is, he will rush back to us. When that time comes, we will be able to get rid of him." Hoffs laughed heartily. It hadn't been easy for him to suppress those disloyal family clans in Hushvale City. Now, he finally saw hope for revenge. The members of the Han family in Fort Lossberg had more or less learned about Hoffs and Larrickson's unusual behavior. For the past few years, the Han family had stopped expanding in the City of Shadows. The Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in the City of Shadows did not increase. They also stopped participating in the affairs of the City of Shadows and kept a low profile. However, the Han family had been growing stronger in the dark. Although the Han family had stopped expanding in the City of Shadows, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy had formed an alliance with many large family clans in the Death and Destruction Dominions. The Celestial Pearl Pharmacy's influence extended to the Death, Darkness, and Destruction Dominions. With enough black crystal coins to support them, the Han family was able to recruit even more experts. Before Han Shua left Fort Lossberg, not only had the 8 Desolation and Torment formation been fortified, but it had also been restored. Over the years, an endless stream of disciples of the Han family had entered the 8 Desolation and Torment formation to cultivate. The overall strength of the Han family had rapidly increased. Han Shua's influence in the 3 Dominions was still considerable. Through his connections in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in the 3 Dominions, he learned of Larrickson's trip to Hoffs and the unusual behavior of Larrickson and Hoffs. He could roughly guess that Larrickson and Hoffs' target was Fort Lossberg. Although the Han family had rapidly grown in strength, Hoffs and Larrickson were just too powerful. Hoffs was the ruler of Hushvale City and Larrickson was the younger brother of the Broadhurst Patriarch. If the two were to join hands and attack Fort Lossberg, the Han family would be utterly annihilated. Phoebe, Emily, Ermite Cotton, Statholm, Sanguiner, Bollins, Gilbert, and other high-ranking members of the Han family gathered in the Han family's meeting hall in Fort Lossberg to discuss how to deal with Hoffs and Larrickson. It is said that when Larrickson went to Hushvale City, he brought 3 high gods of the Broadhurst family with him. Larrickson himself possesses late-stage high god strength. This fella is too terrifying. Hoffs is the city lord of Hushvale City. If he comes, he will surely bring a large number of Hushvale City divine guards with him. With our current strength, we won't be able to deal with them, said Emily worriedly as she looked at the few. The Han family had no idea how to deal with these 2 formidable forces. It was impossible for the Han family to gain the strength to deal with an entire city in just a few years. They did not know how to deal with the formidable threats of Hoffs and Larrickson. Sigh, it's a pity that Master isn't here. If Master were here, those 2 would be in serious trouble, sighed Gilbert. In his mind, Han Shua was an invincible existence. Although Larrickson and Hoffs were powerful, they had suffered greatly in the hands of Han Shua. It was obvious that they were far inferior to Han Shua. Humph, if Master is really here in Fort Lossberg, I doubt that those 2 would have the guts to come here, shouted Sanguiner coldly. His eyes turned crimson red and wisps of blood mist visible to the naked eye started to seep out from his body. It appeared that his strength had once again increased by leaps and bounds. Brian isn't here. We can only rely on ourselves. Stratholm the old monster furrowed his brows and said, "First of all, we must never leave Fort Lossberg. Inside the fort, we still have something to rely on and can wait for our enemy to exhaust himself. But once we leave the fort, we won't be able to deal with those 2. Statholm remained calm and continued, "Also, send someone to inform Erebus Aobashi, Carmelita, Andre, and the others about the situation here. These people are close to us. If they receive the news, they will not sit idly by. As long as they can get to Fort Lossberg, our chances of winning will greatly increase. All right, I'll send someone to inform them right away. Phoebe immediately nodded in agreement. She dispatched her men, and Fort Lossberg became bustling with activity. Many figures quietly left Fort Lossberg to fight for the survival of the Han family. Chapter 877. A few days later, Phoebe, Statholm, and the others gathered together. They were all wearing ugly expressions as they tried to suppress the anger in their hearts. The people who were sent out to deliver the news returned one after another, but none of them brought back good news. Carmelita was still in seclusion, and the news could not reach her. Andre had gone to Blackwater City 10 days ago and had yet to return. As for Erebus and Aobashi, they had been dispatched by City Lord Wallace on a secret mission somewhere. It was hard to say if they were still in the City of Shadows. Naturally, the Han family members who were sent to deliver the news did not even see the shadows of the two. Carmelita, Andre, Erebus, and Aobashi, the four people who were closest to the House of Han, had disappeared without a trace as if they had agreed to meet at such a sensitive time. This caused Phoebe and the others to feel gloomy, not knowing what they should do. It can't be that coincidental. There is no way that Carmelita, Andre, Erebus, and Aobashi would all vanish at such a crucial time. Of all times, it would happen right after Larrickson entered Hushvale City. Phoebe gnashed her teeth and said angrily, "Back when Brian was in the City of Shadows, he was very close to those four. If not for Brian's help, Carmelita and Erebus would not have survived until now. Who would have thought that they would be so heartless?" Perhaps this wasn't their intention. Statholm the old monster explained with a gloomy face, "There is one person who could have sent all four of them away and prevented them from receiving our message for the time being." "Wallace," Ermite called out in a deep and meaningful tone. Statholm the old monster nodded and said, "He is the only person who could send Erebus, Aobashi, and Andre away at the same time. He could also force Carmelita into seclusion. This person is the most powerful person in the City of Shadows. He is the only person in the entire city who could do such a thing." Yes, given Brian's relationship with those four, they definitely wouldn't sit idly by after receiving our message. Wallace definitely had something to do with the current situation. It looks like even though Wallace isn't going to do anything to us, he's planning on killing us with a borrowed knife. Ermite Cotton said hatefully, "We should have left the City of Shadows long ago. That guy is obviously someone who would burn bridges after crossing the river. That's what happened to the House of Lavers." Gilbert shouted loudly, "In my opinion, we should just fight with that despicable person first. I hate this kind of person who plays dirty behind the scenes the most." "No." Statholm shook his head and said, "Larrickson and Hoffs are already too much for us to handle. Even if we know that Wallace is behind all this, we can't show it now. Let's wait for Brian's news. We can't even protect ourselves now, so we can't make another strong enemy." "Then what should we do?" Gilbert sighed, his face full of frustration. "Let's hold on for now. Don't worry, I have already contacted a few major family clans in the Death and Destruction Dominions. Although Wallace wants us dead, our business partners don't want to see anything happen to us. They have already sent their men to Fort Lossberg. As long as we can hold on until reinforcements arrive, we will be able to leave the City of Shadows." Emily forced a smile and consoled. Over the years, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy had cooperated with some family clans in the Death and Destruction Dominions. They had set up shops in the Death and Destruction Dominions. As the medicinal pellets refined by Han Shuo were extremely miraculous, those family clans had earned a large amount of black crystal coins. To those family clans, as long as Han Shuo was alive, they were more than happy to continue working with the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Therefore, when Emily informed them of their predicament, those family clans immediately announced that they would send their men to the City of Shadows in the Darkness Dominion to help them leave Fort Lossberg. "That's great news." Statholm the old monster nodded gratifyingly and said, "Then we should start preparing. Since Wallace wants to kill us with a borrowed knife, We really can't stay in the City of Shadows any longer. Right, let's move our assets and materials out of the City of Shadows as soon as possible and get ready to leave Fort Lossberg. Before our allies arrive, we will have to stay in Fort Lossberg and defend against them using the formations in the fort. Don't worry, his lordship has spent a lot of time and effort setting up the fort. Even if those fellows come, they won't be able to break in. Ballins the old assassin said in a cold voice. Then let's prepare to fight with all our might. Sanguiner's eyes were bloodshot. It seemed that he was ready to start a massacre. For the next few days, Fort Lossberg was bustling with activity. Under the management of the Han family, energy towers and cannons were installed in every corner of the fort. The once barren fort had now become a famous, dangerous place in the City of Shadows. All kinds of deadly boundaries and seals were installed everywhere. With the support of large amounts of black crystal coins and energy crystals, Fort Lossberg now had many terrifying weapons of mass destruction. It had the most elite divine guards in the City of Shadows, the Fifth Corps, Sanguiner, Ballins, and other ruthless and merciless experts whose strength had improved by leaps and bounds. The entire Fort Lossberg was bustling with activity after orders were issued. Silhouettes could be seen at all the gates of the fort. Energy crystal cannons that glowed with bright light were pushed to the gates and coldly aimed at the vast wilderness, waiting for the enemy to invade. Deep in a dense forest 1,000 miles away from Fort Lossberg, the chief of Second Corps, Ralph, was lying in ambush like a viper. Behind him were the Second Corps Divine Guards who were once defeated by the Fifth Corps. They wore ice-cold expressions as they silently listened to Ralph's orders. You should all know why we are here. We are not the ones who will be taking action. But once the battle begins, we will be responsible for taking care of those who have slipped through the net. The Han family's actions have seriously threatened the interests of the House of Saint. Aobashi, Erebus, and the others have been bewitched by Brian and will not attack them. We are the only ones who can take care of this mission. Ralph's face was cold and sinister. He looked at his subordinates who were glinting with ferocious gazes and said, The Han family may seem to be keeping a low profile all these years, but they are in fact very close to some family clans in the Death and Destruction Dominions. They have established branches of Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in the Death and Destruction Dominions. They are getting stronger and stronger. If we don't eliminate them now, we won't have another chance in the future. Don't worry, my lord. The existence of the Fifth Corps has seriously threatened the survival of our Second Corps. Regardless of the reason, we will annihilate the Fifth Corps and the Han family from the City of Shadows, said one of the subordinates in a sinister face. After taking a short pause, he hesitated for a moment before he continued, but that Brian is nowhere to be found. He is so powerful. If one day he learns of what we have done, wouldn't it be inappropriate? Many people's faces jolted at the mention of Han Shuo. Although Han Shuo was not in the City of Shadows for the past few years, those in the City of Shadows could not forget what he had done. In their hearts, Han Shuo was an expert second only to City Lord Wallace. As long as Han Shuo was alive, he would always be a threat to them. Ralph's face turned cold and he said, What are we afraid of? The City Lord is the most powerful existence in the City of Shadows. Even if he learns of what we have done, the City Lord will protect us. Don't worry, no matter what happens, the City Lord will take care of it for us. Although the subordinates were still apprehensive after hearing Ralph's words, they did not say anything else. They all knew Ralph's temperament and knew that there was a grudge between Ralph and Han Shuo. They did not dare to make Ralph unhappy at this critical moment. The group of Second Corps Divine Guards, led by Ralph, were secretly hiding in a secluded corner of Fort Lossberg. As soon as they heard the cannons from Fort Lossberg, they would immediately disperse and annihilate any member of the Han family that walked out of Fort Lossberg. In another direction, Larrickson and Hoffs were stealthily approaching Fort Lossberg with several groups of troops. Although the experts of Hoff's family clan had suffered significant losses, he was, after all, the City Lord of Hushvale City. Many outsiders would be more than happy to submit to him. After a period of replenishment, Hoffs had regained some of his strength. Larrickson's face was cold and gloomy. He could not stop thinking about revenge. The tragic scene of his son's death haunted his mind day and night, torturing him day and night, making him restless and restless. Brian, the Han family, the House of Lavers, and Donna, all of you deserve to die, thought Larrickson as he gnashed his teeth. When the news of Larrickson's son's death spread in the city of Gorging Clouds, Donna immediately guessed that the murderer must be Han Shuo, as Han Shuo had sought her out. Fearing that Larrickson would vent his anger on her after finding out the truth, Donna told her father about the incident that very night. Field immediately made up his mind to escape from the city of Gorging Clouds, while Larrickson was frantically searching for the murderer. After Larrickson found out about the incident, he pursued Field with all his might. But as Field managed to escape in time, Larrickson did not manage to annihilate the House of Lavers. Since then, the House of Lavers had vanished from the death, darkness, and destruction dominions. No matter how hard Larrickson searched, he could not find anyone from the House of Lavers. The House of Lavers, Donna, Han Shuo, and the Han family had become a deep-seated hatred that Larrickson could never let go of. He could not find the House of Lavers or Han Shuo. Therefore, he decided to target the Han family of Fort Lossberg. He was going to start with the Han family. Half a month later, a group of Avengers led by Larrickson, Hoffs, and Larrickson arrived at Fort Lossberg from Hushvale City. They did not waste any time and immediately launched a fierce attack. They intended to flatten Fort Lossberg with overwhelming force. Chapter 878. Larrickson and Hoffs had the same goal. They led the experts of Hushvale City and the House of Broadhurst to Fort Lossberg. As soon as they arrived, the two gave the order to attack and ordered their subordinates to storm Fort Lossberg. In their minds, Han Shuo was the only expert in Fort Lossberg. When they discovered that Han Shuo was not in Fort Lossberg, they did not take the Han family in Fort Lossberg seriously. The two had the most elite divine guards of Hushvale City and high gods of the House of Broadhurst. Larrickson and Hoffs also possessed late-stage high god strengths. Even the House of Kinson and the House of Kisa that had stood proudly in the City of Shadows for many years, let alone the House of Han and Fort Lossberg, would not be able to withstand such a ferocious attack. Outside of Fort Lossberg, Larrickson and Hoffs wore cold and gloomy expressions as they looked at their subordinates flying towards Fort Lossberg. They didn't care about anyone from the House of Han except Han Shuo at all. They felt that they had already given the House of Han enough face by coming here in person. Before a super expert appeared, the two of them would never lower their statuses and personally make a move. The human figures flew towards Fort Lossberg. Each and every one of them was howling wildly and ferociously. The divine weapons in their hands were overflowing with astonishing divine energy. They appeared to be brimming with confidence and thought nothing of Fort Lossberg. All of a sudden, thunderous explosions sounded from within Fort Lossberg. Shortly after, dazzling beams of light carrying astonishing amounts of energy bombarded the outside of Fort Lossberg. The beams of light were as thick as a man's waist. More than a dozen of them shot out at the same time. Hoff's divine guards from Hushvale City were caught off guard, and many of them were struck by the energy beams. The divine bodies of many mid-gods were instantly penetrated. Those who were struck by the energy beams fell to the ground with grievous injuries. Ever since the Han family took over Fort Lossberg, they had spared no expense in spending crystal coins on the defense of the fort. Countless energy crystals were transported from various mines to Fort Lossberg and used to fill the energy crystal cannons. These energy crystal cannons were extremely powerful and destructive. With enough energy crystals, they could unleash as much power as a high god. The dozen or so energy crystal cannons were usually placed on the outer walls of Fort Lossberg to deter outsiders. But now that the enemy had arrived, Phoebe and the others had placed the dozen or so energy crystal cannons in the energy towers so that they could launch a surprise attack at the enemy. One had to admit that the casualties suffered by Hoff's divine guards were their own doing. If they weren't so conceited and arrogant, if they had been a little more cautious, they would not have suffered such a heavy blow from the energy crystal cannons. With the energy crystals in the energy towers, the dozen or so energy crystal cannons fired dazzling beams of light at Hoff's divine guards. In the blink of an eye, dozens of Hushvale City divine guards were blasted by the energy crystal cannons and died on the spot. Beneath the energy towers, The members of the Han family continued to fill the energy crystal cannons with energy crystals. Dazzling beams of light soared into the sky. Loud rumbles were heard as the energy cannons rained down on the Hushvale City Divine Guards. One after another, human figures fell from the sky. Severed limbs and blood rained down from the sky. The entrance to Fort Lossberg was dyed crimson. Be careful. Spread out. Hoffs did not expect that a puny little Fort Lossberg would possess so many energy crystal cannons and so many energy crystals. He was so angry that he yelled at the top of his lungs. The energy crystal cannons were very expensive. Every time they fired, they would consume an enormous amount of energy crystal cannons. Many people believed that the energy crystal cannons were worth tens of thousands of black crystal coins. That was why even though some small family clans had energy crystal cannons, they would not expend so much energy crystal cannons. But what they did not know was that the Han family of Celestial Pearl Pharmacy was able to rake in an astonishing amount of profits every year due to its branches in the Death, Destruction, and Darkness dominions. The Han family was now filthy rich, and they could afford to consume such an enormous amount of energy crystal cannons. Due to Hoff's miscalculation, nearly 100 Hushvale City Divine Guards were killed in just a few moments. That was equivalent to an entire company of Divine Guards. The energy crystal cannons did not stop firing. They fired at the human figures flying above Fort Lossberg and at the enemies stationed at the Fort Lossberg in the distance. Beams after beams of burning energy crystal cannons bombarded the Hushvale City Divine Guards. Hoff's shout was drowned out by the deafening explosions of the energy crystal cannons. His Divine Guards continued to charge towards Fort Lossberg without a care for their own safety. But this time, they had learned their lesson. They spread out and kept a large distance between each other. With that, the dozen or so energy crystal cannons could no longer be as arrogant as before. Under the continuous bombardment, only 20 or so Hushvale City Divine Guards fell from the sky. The Hushvale City Divine Guards finally flew into the sky above Fort Lossberg and landed on the ground. The first Divine Guard to land suddenly jolted. He discovered that he was stopped by an invisible barrier. He could not enter Fort Lossberg at all. But just as he was about to get up, he discovered that the invisible barrier suddenly exerted a strong pulling force on him. He could not control his body and began to sway in the sky above Fort Lossberg. It was at this moment that an energy crystal cannon shot into the sky and bombarded the Divine Guard, turning him into mincemeat. After him, 15 people successively fell from the bombardment of the energy crystal cannons, but without exception, they were all blocked by the barrier formed by the energy towers. Similarly, more and more energy crystal cannons shot into the sky. Those unfortunate Divine Guards who fell into the barrier were struck by the crystal cannons and died on the spot. Both the energy crystal cannons and the energy barrier were powered by the energy provided by the energy crystals in the energy towers. Therefore, the energy from the energy crystal cannons could not be hindered by the energy barrier at all. That was also the reason why the Hushvale City Divine Guards were so confident in charging into Fort Lossberg. As a result, they tasted the bitter fruit. Every single Divine Guard that dared to charge into Fort Lossberg was killed. The energy crystal cannons and the energy barrier worked in tandem to kill every Divine Guard that dared to charge into the barrier. In just the blink of an eye, dozens of Divine Guards were killed. They died horrible deaths. "All of you, get back here!" shouted Hoffs furiously as he hovered in midair. It was too late for Hoffs to shout. Most of the intruders had been killed. Many of them realized that things were not going well for them and decided to stay where they were. Before they even entered Fort Lossberg, Hoffs had lost more than 150 of his subordinates. Hoffs had used up a lot of his forces during the last chaos in Hushvale City. Recently, he had managed to deter a few other family clans with ill intentions. The death of his Divine Guards caused him great heartache. He was worried that if this continued, those family clans would start plotting against him again after learning that he had lost even more of his forces. City Lord, with both the energy crystal cannons and the energy barrier protecting Fort Lossberg, this is going to be difficult. We have been too impulsive. It seems that the Han family is truly wealthy. They are willing to burn their money to resist us, said the chief of the First Corps to Hoffs in a grave face. Let's destroy the energy barrier first. Once the barrier is destroyed, we will be able to charge into Fort Lossberg. Hoffs was enraged, but he did not lose his mind. He put on a dark face and shouted, "Once we enter Fort Lossberg and encounter them head-on, they will not be able to stop us with their strength. Let's work together to destroy the energy barrier. The Han family must be very wealthy. We have made the right decision this time," said Larrickson in a mischievous smile. He was thinking about the black crystal coins of the Han family. The divine guards that Larrickson brought with him were the elites of the House of Broadhurst. They did not participate in the assault on Fort Lossberg. Although Hoffs had lost 100 or so divine guards, Larrickson and his subordinates were unharmed. Therefore, while Hoffs was cursing and swearing, Larrickson could leisurely think about how to divide the black crystal coins of the Han family. Upon hearing Larrickson's words, Hoff's eyes lit up. He looked at Fort Lossberg greedily and said, "That's right. For the Han family to be able to provide so many energy crystals, they must be very wealthy. I have long investigated and found out that many family clans in the abyss of death and destruction have business dealings with them. God knows how many crystal coins they have earned from the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy over the years. If we can get those crystal coins, we will be able to make up for the losses of my subordinates." Larrickson shot a glance at Hoffs, but did not say anything. He seemed to be plotting something. "Let's attack Fort Lossberg together. Every time the energy barrier on the fort withstands a wave of our attacks, it will cost tens of thousands of black crystal coins. Humph. Let's see how many waves the energy crystals and the energy towers can withstand," shouted Hoffs as he waved his hand. Following Hoff's command, the divine guards of Hushvale City started bombarding Fort Lossberg with their divine energy and divine weapons from a distance. Beams of colorful divine energy landed on Fort Lossberg like meteors. All sorts of bizarre divine weapons with astonishing penetrative power whizzed out and bombarded the fort. "Hold them off. Damn it, we have a lot of crystal coins. When those bastards get in, they will surely rob the energy crystals and the energy towers. Fill them up. Don't leave any for them. At the very least, it will consume their divine energy. Humph. When they arrive at the Han family, we will show them what we're made of," shouted Dark Dragon Gilbert from Fort Lossberg. He instructed the divine guards of the Han family to place the sparkling energy crystals into the energy towers. Chapter 879. Gilbert shouted from inside Fort Lossberg. He himself had joined in the burning of money. He was stuffing energy crystal after energy crystal into the energy towers while mumbling to himself, "God damn it. One energy crystal is worth 3,000 black crystal coins. How extravagant." The energy crystals used in the Han family's energy tower were of the highest purity and contained the highest amount of energy. These energy crystals could provide a huge amount of energy, allowing the energy tower to support the energy crystals and the energy barrier, which cooperated with the attack of enemies. Although more than 100 of the invading enemies were killed, the energy crystals used in Fort Lossberg were worth at least 1,000,000 black crystal coins. To some small family clans, 1,000,000 black crystal coins was an enormous sum. Their tax revenue and profits for several years might not even be worth 1,000,000 black crystal coins. Gilbert cursed and shouted at the Han family guards to continue filling the energy crystals with all their might. The energy towers were glowing with dazzling radiance. Not only did they support the energy boundaries, but they also shot beams of light at the outside of Fort Lossberg, aimed at Hoffs and his men who were attacking the fort. Before entering the Han family, these guards of the Han family had gone through many rounds of interrogation. Every single one of them had a clean background and extraordinary talent. Of course, most of them possessed mid-god strength before they entered the Han family. Once they entered the Han family, with the enormous financial support of the Han family, they would first be provided with the most suitable divine weapons and divine armors. Then, they would be sent to the 8 Desolation and Torment formation to temper themselves. After exiting the formation, they would be personally trained by Balans and the others. After going through many rounds of tempering, every single one of these guards possessed strength that could not be underestimated. They had tenacious minds and were calm in their actions. They would never drop the ball at a critical moment. With them in charge of filling and operating the energy crystals, they They were much more efficient than the other divine guards in the City of Shadows. Not only did those energy crystal cannons possess incredible firepower, but they also had a long range. Under the bombardment of the energy crystal cannons, Hoff's subordinates were thrown into confusion. Many of them were struck by the energy crystal cannons and killed outside Fort Lossberg. Every bombardment from Fort Lossberg was burning money. Using the wealth and energy crystals they had, the 30 or so soldiers on Fort Lossberg's side were able to keep the invaders led by Hoffs and his men at bay. Spread out. Damn it. Don't you know that those energy crystal cannons have a long range? Hoffs couldn't help but yell and curse when he saw that more and more of his subordinates were dying. He ordered them to distance themselves from each other. Larrickson and the high gods of the House of Broadhurst had no choice but to expend their divine energy to form a boundary to protect the area they were in. Larrickson and the high gods were all respected characters in the City of Gorging Clouds. Naturally, they would not hide like Hoffs and his followers. For the sake of their reputation, they had no choice but to consume the divine energy in their bodies to resist the energy blasts that were falling from the sky. The battle was in a stalemate. One side was powerful while the other side had sufficient financial resources. Just like that, the battle continued. It was obvious that Fort Lossberg was on the losing side. The number of energy crystals they could carry was limited. They had used up too many of their energy crystals to withstand the high-intensity attacks. Gradually, they discovered that they were running out of energy crystals. Lord Gilbert, we're running out of energy crystals. What should we do? Asked a man who was as hot-tempered as the Dark Dragon. Of course we're retreating. What do you think we should do? Are we going to rush out and die? Shouted Gilbert. Brothers, it's about time. Let's get out of this godforsaken place while there's still some energy left in the energy towers. Come on, let's return to the Han family first. We have plenty of time. We'll take our time, shouted the army. They filled the remaining energy crystals into the energy towers and swiftly retreated to the Han family at the center of Fort Lossberg. Not a single one of them hesitated. It was as though they had been trained in this field before. All the energy crystals in the area had been stuffed into the energy towers. There was nothing of value left in the vicinity. In the blink of an eye, not even a shadow of the army could be seen. Although they had already left, the energy towers were still firing beams of light at the enemies outside Fort Lossberg due to the support of the energy crystals. In just a short while, a few dozen of Hoff's subordinates had been struck by the energy crystal cannons. Even Larrickson and the experts of the Han family had exhausted a significant amount of their divine energy to maintain the energy barriers. Gradually, the energy crystal cannons inside Fort Lossberg calmed down. They listened carefully and discovered that the fort was completely silent. There were no signs of the attacks. Let's go in. There's no one left, said Larrickson calmly to Hoffs after carefully sensing for a moment. Hoffs had also noticed the anomaly inside Fort Lossberg, even without Larrickson's warning. But this time, Hoffs was much more cautious. He pointed at one of his subordinates and instructed, "Go in and see what's going on." The subordinate felt bitter, but he dared not show it. He nodded and went into the fort. Hoffs cautiously descended into the air above Fort Lossberg. When he finally broke through the energy barrier, he shouted, "The energy barrier has been completely depleted. The energy towers are no longer glowing. My lord, there's no one left." "Let's go in," commanded Hoffs. He knew that there would be no more danger for the time being. Hoffs and Larrickson flew out and landed at the center of Fort Lossberg. As soon as Hoffs and Larrickson entered the fort, they immediately looked around with glistening eyes as though they were looking for something valuable. Hoffs rolled his eyes and cursed, "Damn it, there's nothing left. That damned Han family, they really don't leave us any loot." Larrickson wore a dark face. It was obvious that he was dissatisfied with the barrier. He let out a cold groan and said, "Now that we have entered the fort, it will be much easier. Hee, the Han family is right at the center of the fort. Let's see what they can do." "Hoffs, don't worry. I'm certain that the Han family has what you want." "I can't wait any longer." Hoffs put on a cold face and commanded, "Let's go to the center of the fort and annihilate the Han family." Asterisk 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 at the center of Fort Lossberg, the Han family. Unbeknownst to him, layers of thick, dark clouds had strangely stopped in the sky above the Han family. These dark clouds were very strange, as they only covered the area around the Han family. Other than that, the rest of Fort Lossberg was clear, and the sun shone down warmly. Inside the Han family, chilly winds blew. Clouds of hazy mist came out of nowhere and filled every corner of the Han family. The Han family was shrouded in mist, and no one could see what was inside the Han family. Balins, Sanguiner, have all the demonic formations been activated? Asked Phoebe in a solemn face. She was in a spacious meeting room at the top of the tallest building in the Han family. No problem. I have checked them one last time. They have all been activated. Sanguiner nodded. His crimson eyes gazed into the distance. He took a deep breath and said, Gilbert has returned. He should have completed his mission. It seems that it won't be long before Hoffs and his men arrive. Mr. Stadholm, are there any other unrelated people in the fort? Emily asked Stadholm with a faint smile. Stadholm nodded and smilingly replied, They have left long ago. Other than our Han family, there are no other people from the City of Shadows in the fort. Those people have nothing to do with our Han family. I believe that even if Wallace wants to get rid of us, he won't be able to do anything to them. We can spread the news through their mouths. I think Wallace is just waiting to be scolded, Ermike interjected. Ermike Cotton interjected. He felt that such a petty city lord would never be able to bring the City of Shadows to greater heights. I finally understand why the City of Shadows is ranked just above Hushvale City in the Darkness Dominion. Hoffs isn't forbearing enough, and Wallace isn't tolerant enough. Although the two possess extraordinary strength, they can't achieve greatness because of these two traits. Who cares? As long as we can get through this, we will leave the City of Shadows and look for Brian. Given Brian's strength, he will surely bring a bright future to our Han family. Stadholm put on a relaxed smile and consoled the crowd. Although I haven't spent much time with Brian, I know that he has limitless potential. In the future, our Han family will surely surpass Wallace's House of Saint. When that time comes, we can come back for revenge. It seemed that Stadholm had underestimated Han Shua's capabilities. The current Han Shua did not even need to fight personally. Just the power that Little Skull Han Hao possessed was enough to completely suppress the Saint family of the City of Shadows. I'm back. Damn it. I've used up so many energy crystals. My heart aches. It was at this moment that Dark Dragon Gilbert's voice sounded. Moments later, Gilbert walked into the room with a pained face. It's all right. As long as we can get results, we don't mind losing some energy crystals. Emily put on a faint smile and asked, How did it go, Dark Dragon? We killed 200 of their divine guards. Gilbert laughed sinisterly and said, There were many who suffered light or serious injuries. Even Larrickson and the others must have used up some of their divine energy. Wonderful. Haha, Dark Dragon, you are really something? Shouted Sanguiner. His eyes were bloodshot as he said, Just you wait. I will not lose to you. I will make them wail like ghosts and howl like wolves. Chapter 880. Fort Lossberg, in front of the Han family's residence. Larrickson, Hoffs, and their subordinates had finally arrived at this place. The Hushvale City Divine Guards, who had been fuming with anger all along the way, stopped in front of the Han family's residence. Their faces were filled with worry and vigilance. From the outside, the Han family's residence was shrouded in strange dark clouds. Thick smoke lingered in the air, and it was impossible to tell what dangers lurked within. The Hushvale City Divine Guards, who had suffered heavy casualties from the energy crystal cannons, had grown fearful of the Han family. They no longer dared to venture into the city. After Larrickson and Hoffs arrived at the House of Han, they immediately gestured for their subordinates to stop after they saw the unusual situation in the House of Han. The two wore gloomy faces and were secretly probing the situation inside the House of Han with their divine souls. After a long while, the two were astonished. Hoff softly cried out, Something's wrong. My divine soul seems to be blocked by layers upon layers of thick fog. I can't sense any signs of life. That's impossible. Those fellows must be in there. They must have used some special method to cut off our soul probing. Larrickson nodded in agreement. That's right. I can't sense any signs of life either. But I am certain that none of the Hahn family has left Fort Lossberg. According to my sources, they have been defending Fort Lossberg all this time. Those who have left Fort Lossberg are just some unrelated people. Hofs knew that Larrickson had communicated with Wallace, the city lord of the City of Shadows. He bunched his brows when he heard Larrickson's words. He sneered and said, Wallace sure is a petty man, but this is a good thing for me. After we exterminate the Hahn family, I will spread the news. If Brian is still alive, he will know what role Wallace played. When that time comes, Wallace will be on our side whether he is willing or not. That's right. Wallace has his own plans, and we have ours as well. Hee. Although we are the direct actors in this matter, Wallace will not be able to get away with it. Larrickson had no intention of letting Wallace off the hook. He had long planned how to drag Wallace into this mess. I didn't expect this Hahn family to be so hard to deal with. It seems like we have to be careful, said Hofs to Larrickson in a grave expression as he stared at the Hahn family shrouded in thick mist. Let's try attacking the fortress from a distance like we did earlier, Larrickson suggested. Hofs nodded and commanded, move a distance away from the Hahn residents and attack together with them. Humph, let's see if the Hahn family can withstand our joint attack. The divine guards of Hushvale City did not hesitate after hearing Hof's command. They shot more light curtains of divine energy at the Hahn family shrouded in mist. They wanted to probe the situation inside the Hahn family. The intertwining light screen fell into the foggy Hahn family, but it was like a stone sinking into the ocean, without any signs of life. Hofs and Larrickson focused their attention but did not hear any screams from the Hahn family. Not only that, when the various attacks landed on the Hahn family, there were no violent explosions. Something's not right. Needless to say, everyone knew that the House of Hahn, who was shrouded in thick fog, would not be easy to deal with. With the precedent of what happened in front of the fortress, they were all like birds that were startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. The first thing they thought about was how to protect their lives. Everyone, be careful. You, and you. The few of you, go inside and see what's going on. They might just be putting on a show, said Hofs as he pointed out a few more cannon fodder and ordered them to enter the Hahn family first. The hearts of the Hushvale City Divine Guards who were called out sank. They slowly and nervously entered the Hahn family. As soon as they entered the Hahn family shrouded in mist, they discovered that their vision was greatly affected. They could not see anything more than 10 meters away. When they stepped on the flat ground of the Hahn family, they felt as though they were riding the clouds. They felt that everything around them had become so unreal. Larrickson and Hofs focused their divine souls and paid close attention to every movement of the cannon fodder. They discovered that after the cannon fodder entered the Hahn family, they did not encounter the ferocious attacks that they had expected. With that, the two felt a little more at ease. However, they did not dare to let their guard down and continued to sense the movements of the cannon fodder. Gradually, the few of them went deep into the Hahn residence. However, after going around and around, they realized that they had no idea where the exit was. They walked around in the foggy area, but they couldn't find the end. They couldn't see a single building, and they couldn't sense any signs of life. Larrickson and Hofs wore puzzled expressions. They could sense the divine soul auras of the cannon fodder and their general location. However, the two discovered that the cannon fodder were only circling around a small area. No matter how hard they tried, they would not venture deeper. Hofs felt that it was rather odd, and he had been cursing the cannon fodder outside. However, the cannon fodder that he had sent into the Hahn family did not seem to hear his voice at all. They were still circling around a small area, as though they had lost their way. They could not venture deeper, nor could they find a way back to report to their superiors. Hofs gradually grew impatient. He pointed at a few of his subordinates and instructed, "The few of you, go in from the other side. There might be some kind of spatial folding boundary set up inside. Keep an eye out. Don't be as useless as those guys who still can't find a way to get in or out. Don't worry, my lord. I cultivate in the Edict of Space. If there is a spatial folding boundary set up inside, I should be able to detect it, one of the divine guards assured Hafs before he dived into the boundary. Another group of soldiers charged into the Han family. They continued to wander around the misty area, trying to venture deeper into the Han family. However, for some unknown reason, as soon as they entered a specific area, they would all be knocked out as though they were drugged. They would wander around in a small area like the first group of soldiers. Hafs knew that the Han family would not be easy to deal with. He did not send any more of his subordinates deeper into the Han family. He turned to Larrickson and asked, "What do you think? There must be some kind of spatial energy inside. Otherwise, there's no way such a thing could happen." However, the person who set up the spatial defensive boundary must have a profound mastery of the energy of space. Your subordinates couldn't detect any clues at all. That's why they were trapped inside, Larrickson explained to Hafs after thinking for a moment. "What should we do then?" Hafs glanced at the few people around Larrickson and said in a deep voice, "I think it's time for you all to show your sincerity, right?" Hafs and Larrickson had come together with Larrickson. However, up until now, Larrickson and his companions had only sent out Hafs' subordinates from Hushvale City. Larrickson and his companions had yet to make a move. It was clearly not a result that Hafs would like to see. In any case, it was time for Larrickson and his companions to make a move. Larrickson put on a mischievous smile and nodded. "All right." He turned to a high god of lightning behind him and said, "Kinu, go in and have a look. Your energy of lightning can affect space. I believe that if you bombard the barrier with your energy of lightning, you should be able to destroy the spatial energy." The high god named Kinu bowed at Larrickson, and without saying a word, he turned into a bolt of lightning and flew towards the Han family shrouded in mist. As soon as he moved, thunder rumbled in the sky. Tiny lightning bolts slowly emerged from the dark clouds and gathered above the Han family. Inside the Han family, on top of a building shrouded in layers of mist, Ballins wore a gloomy face and shouted, "Open the mirage window and lure them in." "Hee hee, that's exactly what we're going to do. That guy cultivates the power of lightning. Let's give him a way out of this embarrassing situation. Retract the fog for now and leave this matter to me," Gilbert shouted excitedly as he dashed down while waving his arms and legs. Other than Han Shua, Ballins, Sanguiner, and Gilbert were the most familiar with the demonic formations in Fort Lossberg. Before Han Shua left, he had explained the power of the demonic formations and how to activate them in detail. As all three of them had cultivated in demonic arts, they knew very well how powerful demonic formations could be. Under Han Shua's guidance, they knew the situation inside out. Sanguiner, Gilbert, and Ballins got to work. They temporarily concealed a portion of the demonic formations and activated another portion of the demonic formations that were used to create illusions. Everyone, after a while, the fog will disperse, and the window of illusion will be able to clearly show our appearances to the people outside. When that time comes, everyone has to pretend to be scared. It's best if you can add some movements that suggest that you're ready to escape, Sanguiner instructed Phoebe and the others. "Don't worry, we know what to do." Emily smiled, indicating that she understood Sanguiner's words. Kinu entered the depths of the mist and summoned the energy of lightning above his head. Bolts of lightning shot down from the void and bombarded every corner of the Han family. As though some strange mechanism had been triggered, the thick mist that shrouded the Han family suddenly dispersed. Even the ominous dark clouds that were hovering above their heads started to sway. It gave the illusion that the clouds would dissipate at any moment. As though the mist had parted to reveal a rainbow, the Han family that had been blurry all along started to reveal the buildings inside to the outsiders. The members of the Han family wore terrified expressions. Helplessness and despair were written all over their faces. They were at a loss of what to do as they stared blankly at the scene outside. Many of them were fleeing in panic. The realistic scene had fooled everyone. Hafs had been waiting for this moment. He thought that the Han family's barriers had been destroyed by the High God's attack. Hafs licked his lips cruelly and howled, "Charge in! Kill them all!" Chapter 881. In the eyes of Hafs and Larrickson, The Han family no longer had anything to worry about. Wave after wave of High God Kinu's lightning bolts had destroyed all of the Han family's defenses and exposed the Han family. As the mist dissipated, the panic-stricken faces of the House of Han were revealed to the world. It seemed to further prove the desperation and helplessness of the House of Han. Even Hafs and Larixen, the two most powerful leaders of the House of Han, were bewildered, much less the other divine guards. Therefore, at Haf's command, all the divine guards of Hushvale City, including Larixen's divine guards, charged towards the House of Han that had just emerged from the mist. Those leading the charge were not the divine guards of Hushvale City, but Larixen, Hafs, and those subordinates of Larixen's. They were the strongest experts of the party. In the minds of Hafs and Larixen, the Han family that was unguarded at this moment posed no threat. The wealth that the Han family had accumulated over the years seemed to be dazzling and blinding. They were the first to charge at the Han family. Before they were certain that the Han family was safe, the few leaders did not make a move. But now that the Han family was no longer a threat, they charged at the forefront. They wanted to seize all of the Han family's wealth and resources as quickly as possible. In an instant, the group led by Hafs and Larixen had entered the Han family. They headed towards the most luxurious building of the Han family where Phoebe and Statholm resided. They intended to seize the most important building first. Ha ha ha! Gilbert laughed maniacally and shouted, "Demonic formation! Reactivate!" Rays of colorful light suddenly shot into the sky from every corner of the building. It was as though the Han family had turned into an enormous whirlpool. The mist that had just dispersed gathered at an even faster speed. The Han family was once again shrouded in thick mist. At the same time, chilly winds blew past. Ear-piercing wails and howls sounded from every corner of the building. In an instant, the Han family was filled with all kinds of evil energies. The evil energies took effect at the same time and engulfed all living beings in the vicinity, preventing them from escaping from the enormous whirlpool. Hafs immediately sensed that something was amiss. He absent-mindedly shouted, "Not good! Everyone, retreat!" Haf's shout came a little too late. Most of the divine guards from Hushvale City had already entered the city. There were only a few dozen divine guards left outside, and they were the weakest of the group. Larixen's face jolted. He sensed an uneasy aura from the energies that soared into the sky. He suddenly realized that he had fallen into someone else's trap. The feeling made him very uncomfortable. He felt that he had been on the passive side all along. Strange sounds resounded in every area. Suddenly, a strange power appeared in every area. Those demonic arrays began to operate. Illusion arrays, poison arrays, combined soul arrays, and all kinds of other demonic arrays suddenly burst out, firmly trapping the invaders who had gone deep into the area. It was at this moment that the horn of death was blown. Under the effects of the demonic formations, the invaders were slaughtered one after another. Corpses fell into puddles of blood. Strange beams of light shot out from every direction like dense spiderwebs, slicing the invaders into pieces. The members of the Han family, standing in the middle of the building, wore cold and callous expressions. They were in a very pleasant mood as they looked at the wretched situation in every corner of the building. Being in this building, Phoebe and the others weren't affected by the demonic formations of the House of Han. They could see the true destructive attacks of the demonic formations very clearly. They saw the corpses being torn apart and splattered everywhere. They saw the death of those people, the miserable screams and struggles of those people. Life seemed so fragile at this moment. The divine guards of Hushvale City who used to flaunt their prowess were as weak as newborn babies. They could not find a single solution to the bizarre attacks that they had never seen before. All they could do was wait to be slaughtered. Haha, it's good that they're dead. They deserve to be killed for daring to barge into our Han family, shouted Gilbert crazily. He pointed at the nearest areas and explained to Statholm, Candide, and the others how the demonic formations worked. Ballins, Gilbert, and Emily had the deepest understanding of the demonic formations. Apart from the three of them, even Phoebe, Emily, and the others didn't know much about the demonic formations. Although they had confidence in Han Shuo and felt that the demonic formations would be effective before they saw the demonic formations in action, they still couldn't help but feel apprehensive and uncertain about the situation. But now that they had personally witnessed the demonic formations deployed by Han Shuo before he left, they finally understood why Gilbert and Sanguiner were so confident that the demonic formations would make the intruders suffer. At this moment, Stadholm, Ermike, Phoebe, and the others were at a loss for words. They had once again acknowledged the miraculous abilities of Han Shuo and regarded Han Shuo as a super powerful character who could bring them miracles. Their impression of Han Shuo's invincibility grew deeper and deeper. Hee, it's not fun to just watch from here. I'm going down to kill. With bloodshot eyes, Sanguis let out a hideous grin and suddenly leaped into one of the demonic formations. Wielding his broadsword that was glowing with blood-red radiance, he began slaughtering the intruders inside the demonic formations. Without saying a word, Balins also flew into the demonic formations. His killing intent soared to the sky, and with a flash of the slender, flying sword in his hand, he cut an intruder in half. When Stadholm, Ermike, and the others saw Sanguiner and Balins rushing down, they also wanted to try. But Gilbert, who was above, hurriedly stopped them. Everyone, stay here and watch carefully. Those demonic formations don't recognize you. If you get trapped in them, you'll be in trouble. Then why are Sanguiner and Balins fine? Asked Phoebe with a frown. Before Master left, he let the three of us in and told us how to walk through each demonic formation and what to pay attention to at each step. The two of them remembered all of it clearly, so they could charge around unscrupulously without being affected by the demonic formations. Gilbert put on a mischievous smile and said, I can't remember that many steps. Even I don't dare to walk around casually in there. That's why I didn't go down. As for you guys, I don't think it's a good idea to go down there and risk your lives. Upon hearing those words, Stadholm, Emily, and the others were stunned. They exchanged glances with each other and gave up. Even Larrickson and Hofs were unable to break free from the demonic formation for a short period of time. Even now, they were still trapped in the demonic formation. Phoebe and the others were aware of their own limitations and knew better than to show off at a time like this. Brian is just too incredible. I don't think we have anything to worry about this time. Hundreds of our people have died in the demonic formations, said Phoebe, who had been on tenterhooks. She put on a somewhat relaxed face. Upon hearing those words, the others nodded and smiled in agreement. It was as though they no longer cared about the fiendish spirits down there. Don't let your guard down. The demonic formations are powered by the yuan energy of heaven and earth and the energy of the demon generals that Master left behind. Master said that the demonic formations cannot last forever. Let's wait and see. When Sanguiner and Balins have killed enough, and when the power of the demonic formations gradually dissipates, we must retreat as far as we can, said Gilbert as he poured a bucket of cold water on everyone's nerves. Everyone was immediately beaten back to their original state. After hearing Gilbert's words, they all recognized the situation and threw away their unrealistic fantasies. They began to carefully think about how to protect themselves. Gilbert, how long can the demonic formations last? Asked Stadholm with his brows bunched. It's hard to say. It depends on the rate at which the demonic formations consume the yuan energy. In any case, the demonic formations only have so much energy. Once the energy is depleted, the demonic formations will cease to function. We should make preparations in advance and leave as soon as possible while Larrickson and Hof's forces are still trapped. Gilbert let out a helpless sigh and said, Damn it, if Master was here, none of these invaders would be able to leave this place alive. Sigh, it's a pity that we don't have anyone on our side who can deal with experts of Larrickson and Hof's level. Otherwise, humph. Since it's better to leave as soon as possible, let's cut the crap. Gilbert, notify Sanguiner and Balins that we will immediately activate the airship and leave Fort Lossberg as soon as we can, commanded Emily decisively. Don't worry, Sanguiner and Balins will know what to do, replied Gilbert. Emily, Phoebe, Stadholm, and the others hastily issued orders for the invaders to enter the secret underground chamber at the bottom of the building. They wanted to leave the Han family as soon as possible and leave this perilous region as soon as possible. One figure after another shuttled through the building. The Han clan's guards, who were gathered in the various rooms, dived down and left through a wide underground passageway. Sanguiner and Balins shuttled back and forth between the demonic formations. They avoided Larixin, Hoffs, and the other high gods as they madly slaughtered the invaders who were only mid-gods. Sanguiner and Balins were in high spirits. They shuttled back and forth between the demonic formations as if they were having a competition. Their bodies were drenched in blood, and they looked incomparably ferocious. Sanguis, old man, get ready to retreat. Gilbert shouted from inside the building just as they were about to lose themselves. The two slowly regained their senses. They exchanged a glance with each other before they simultaneously darted into the building and joined up with Gilbert. Chapter 882. Although the members of the Han family had left, the demonic formations of the Han family at the center of Fort Lossberg were still operating. Every once in a while, miserable shrieks of despair would be heard from the demonic formations. As Larixin and Hoffs were trapped in the Heart Demon Purgatory formation, the two had no idea what was going on outside. When the Heart Demons attacked them, they fell into a state of confusion. In such a state, Larixin and Hoff's divine soul could not pay attention to what was going on outside. They had to focus all their energy on resisting the Heart Demons. As the two had cultivated to late-stage high god realm, their willpower was much stronger than that of an average god. They were able to use their divine soul to resist the Heart Demons. Around them, some of the more fragile mid-gods lost their minds one after another. They had lost their sense of self after being attacked by the Heart Demons and embarked on the path of self-destruction. Time flew by, and a few days went by in the blink of an eye. The Yuan energy supporting the House of Han was gradually fading away. The demonic formations were losing their power one after another. Many exhausted divine guards of Hushvale City were lucky enough to survive the trip to the gates of hell. Slowly, all the Yuan energy disappeared. The source of energy supporting the Han family's demonic formations had finally dried up. The thick mist that shrouded the Han family had long disappeared. At a glance, all the buildings in the Han family's residence could be seen clearly under the sunlight. After the mist dissipated, the demonic formations had also lost their power. Around the buildings, at the center of the towering pillars, and among the plants were corpses of all shapes and sizes. These were Hoff's divine guards from Hushvale City. They were either missing limbs, drained of blood, or bleeding from their 7 orifices. All of them had died horribly. Of the 1,000 divine guards who had come to Fort Lossberg, only 300 were still alive. Moreover, they were all exhausted and not in the same condition as before. Hoffs took in the scene of devastation before his eyes. An extreme sense of desolation and rage rose from his heart. This was not an outcome that Hoffs wished to see. He had no idea how he should continue looking at the corpses strewn all over the place. At this moment, Hoffs was at a loss. He felt a sense of helplessness, despair, and defeat. For a moment, he did not even think of pursuing the culprit who caused all this. Those divine guards from Hushvale City who were lucky enough to survive the attack were wearing dejected faces. Their eyes were filled with fear and cowardice. They huddled together and tried their best to recover the divine energy in their bodies. Larixin and the others were also very surprised. They did not expect that the strange energy alone would cause Hoffs to lose so many of his subordinates. Although Larixin was rather surprised, he did not feel sad because none of the high gods who came with him had suffered any casualties. Keanu, you guys go and search. See if the Han family members are still around. Larixin pondered for a moment before he gave an order in a cold voice. At the same time, he shot a meaningful glance at Kinu. Kinu knew Larixin very well. He understood that Larixin was implying something from the meaningful glance. Kinu nodded knowingly and immediately got to work. He went to some of the tallest buildings in the city and searched for everything in the Han family. Given Larixin's strength, as soon as all the demonic formations lost their effect, he sensed that there was no one else in the Han family apart from himself. The reason why Larrickson said that was because he wanted to find the Han family's wealth. Kinnu and the others were well aware of that. Therefore, Larrickson's target was the same. Hafs was still immersed in grief and bewilderment. But when he heard Larrickson's instructions to Keanu and the others, he immediately understood what Larrickson was trying to do. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Hafs shouted, "Search the place. Someone has killed someone. Take anything valuable." The exhausted Hushvale City Divine Guards immediately put on bitter faces and started moving again after hearing Haf's order. They quickly searched through the Han family. 10 minutes later, Kinnu, and the Hushvale City Divine Guards returned one after another. Their faces were dispirited. "My lord, not a single person was left alive. Not a single energy crystal or black crystal coin was left. Those damned Han family bastards. They took everything away," Kinnu said to Larrickson in a furious tone. Phoebe had started making preparations the moment she received word that Larrickson and the others had disappeared. Naturally, she would not leave anything valuable for them. The only valuable things in the Han family were the demonic formations that had lost their Yuan energy support. Unfortunately, Larrickson and Hafs did not know how to use demonic formations. Even if they moved everything away, they would never be able to use demonic formations to attack people like the Han family. For Han Shuo, Sanguiner, and Balins who knew how to deploy demonic formations, the materials used to deploy demonic formations were very useful. But for Hafs and Larrickson, those materials were completely useless. "Damn it, they can't get far. Let's go after them." "Humph, other than us, Wallace must have made other arrangements. They won't be able to leave the City of Shadows so easily." Larrickson coldly groaned and said, "They must have escaped towards the Death Dominion. Let's go after them." At this point, Hafs had nothing else to say. So many of his men had died. No matter what, he couldn't give up. Even if it was just for the sake of his subordinates, he had to kill every last member of the House of Han. When his subordinates heard that they would not have to bear any consequences, and that they would not have to worry about being hunted down by Han Shuo, their spirits were lifted. Ralph secretly cursed when he saw the relieved expressions on his subordinates' faces. He thought to himself, "What's so great about Han Shuo that he can intimidate my subordinates?" While Ralph was plotting in his mind, Phoebe and the others on the airship were as calm as could be. As they advanced through the dense forest of the City of Shadows, they tried their best to avoid those unrelated to the City of Shadows. They also had to pay careful attention to their surroundings, fearing that they might run into those with malicious intentions. "There are people gathering in Tanai Valley ahead," Sanguiner suddenly shouted coldly. "I can feel their blood flowing. Every single one of them is very agitated. It seems that we are their target." "Avoid them," Emily commanded decisively. "We cannot stay in the City of Shadows for too long. We must leave this dangerous place as soon as possible. No matter who they are, it is best not to come into contact with them." "But they won't let us hide." Sanguiner forced a smile and shook his head. He said, "They are coming. It seems that we are indeed their target, but we don't know which side they are from. Although the airship saves energy, its speed is limited. It seems that we won't be able to avoid them." Statholm the old monster put on a grave face and said, "Let's fight. Disembark from the airship and get into formation. Prepare for battle." Phoebe and Emily commanded at the same time. One figure after another descended from the huge bat. There were over 700 people in total, and they lined up in an orderly manner. They drew their god artifacts and waited silently for the arrival of the enemies. Every one of these 700 people were carefully selected experts. All of them had been tempered in the 8 Desolation and Torment formation and had been trained in the mountains near Fort Lossberg by Balins and the others. They knew how to coordinate demonic formations. Their minds were firm and indomitable. They were not affected by their enemies at all. Phoebe, Emily, Balins, Sanguiner, Gilbert, Statholm the old monster, and the others were standing at the front of the army. They turned their heads to look at the elite Han family guards behind them. They were secretly proud of themselves. With the same cultivation realm, a team of Han family guards could fend off 2 or even 3 teams of others. With them around, Phoebe and the others felt a little more at ease. A few minutes later, the second core divine guards led by Ralph gradually appeared and stopped in front of the Han family. Ralph had brought most of the second core divine guards with him. They lined up densely in front of Phoebe, Emily, and the others. There were about 700 of them. Ralph, who was leading the group, wore a cold and sinister face. He stared at Phoebe and the others in an unfriendly manner and asked, "Everyone, where are you going?" "I can't believe it's you," replied Phoebe in a cold voice. She did not expect that it would be Ralph blocking their way. It appeared that not only did Wallace acquiesce to Larrickson, Hoffs, and the others' attack on Fort Lossberg, he had also sent Ralph to secretly participate in the attack. "This is the territory of the City of Shadows. You Han family are citizens of the City of Shadows. And now, all the members of the Han family have gathered together and are heading towards the Death Dominion. What are you up to?" Ralph seemed to have thought of an excuse beforehand. He sneered and said, "It seems to me that you are planning to betray the City of Shadows. Hee, it's fortunate that I ran into you. Otherwise, who knows how much damage you will bring to the City of Shadows." "Ran into you? Ha ha ha, how interesting." Stratholme the old monster put on a mocking face and said, "You traveled thousands of miles to this remote and desolate place and brought more than half of your second core divine guards with you to block our way at the most opportune time and the most opportune place. And you have the nerve to say that we happened to bump into each other? Hee, what a coincidence." After listening to Stratholme's explanation, Ralph felt a little embarrassed. Even he himself felt that this coincidental reason was a little too far-fetched. Ralph let out a cold snort and said, "I don't want to make things difficult for you. As long as you return to Fort Lossberg, I won't stop you. I will report this to Wallace and the others immediately. He will give you an explanation after he finds out what happened." After taking a short pause, Ralph continued in a cold and stern voice, "But if you try to leave the City of Shadows, don't blame me for being ruthless." "Wallace? Doesn't he have any integrity?" Phoebe was a straightforward person, and she did not want to play along with Ralph any longer. She said, "Don't put on airs in front of me. Wallace has sent you to kill us. Do you think we will surrender and return to Fort Lossberg to die? How dare you speak rudely to the City Lord? It seems that you are determined to betray the City of Shadows." Ralph sneered and said, "Then I have nothing else to say." He then waved his hand and instructed, "Don't let traitors live. Kill them." Now that things had come to this, how could Phoebe and the others not know Ralph's true intentions? From the start to the end, they had never intended to let the House of Han off. Those excuses were completely to deliberately make things difficult for them. The final outcome was still to exterminate the House of Han. "Ralph, do you think you can take us down?" Sanguiner could no longer restrain himself. He said with bloodshot eyes, "A few years ago, my master could easily defeat you. Now, although my master is no longer here, I can stop you all the same." As soon as he finished those words, Sanguiner's body emitted a mist of blood. The broadsword refined from blood crystal emitted a blood-red radiance that soared into the sky. Sanguiner and his broadsword flew at Ralph. His aura soared and soared. He turned into a streak of blood-red radiance as he charged at Ralph at lightning speed. Ralph's face that was brimming with confidence suddenly jolted. He had inquired about the Han family and knew that neither Han Shuo nor Rose were with the Han family. He only knew of Han Shuo and Rose among the true experts of the Han family. Without them, the Han family would not have a single high god. It was for this reason that Ralph dared to bring his men to stop the Han family. However, as soon as Sanguiner moved, Ralph suddenly sensed that the dense blood aura on his body contained an extremely powerful energy. The evil, bloodthirsty aura made Ralph feel threatened. It was obvious that this kind of energy was not something that a mid-god should possess. What Ralph did not know was that Sanguiner, Ballins, and Gilbert, who cultivated in Blood God Mantra, were extraordinary. A few years ago, during the competition of the 7th Corps, Sanguiner, Gilbert, and Gilbert had the strength to contend against a mid-god and emerge victorious. After such a long time, Sanguiner, Gilbert, and Gilbert had made tremendous progress. They now possessed the strength to fight against high gods of this world. The reason why Sanguiner, Ballins, and Gilbert chose to abandon Fort Lossberg was that Larrickson and Hoffs both possessed late-stage high god strength and had several high gods under their command. The three knew that they were no match for Larrickson, Hoffs, and Gilbert. However, Ralph was just a mid-stage high god. Sanguis might be able to put up a fight against someone of that level. He might be able to suppress Ralph with his blood god mantra and give the House of Han an opportunity to eliminate the second core divine guards. Locke, I will stop this guy. The two of you. Get rid of the rest, shouted Ralph. He charged at Sanguiner, who was releasing terrifying blood aura. Fearing that something might happen to Ralph, Wallace dispatched two early-stage high god experts to participate in the operation. They were Wallace's trusted aides for the past 2 years. They rarely showed their faces in the House of Saint because they wanted to ensure that the House of Han was annihilated without anyone knowing about it. At Ralph's command, two early-stage high god experts charged out from the second core divine guards. One cultivated in the energy of darkness and the other cultivated in the energy of earth. Both possessed early-stage high god strengths. Ballins and Gilbert exchanged glances with each other before they simultaneously flew out and stopped the two trusted aides of Wallace. Although Ballins and Gilbert did not progress as rapidly as Sanguiner, they were still much faster than Phoebe and the others. They could handle an early-stage high god that had just entered the realm of high god. Han family divine guards, charge at them with all your might. Let them see who is the strongest, commanded Phoebe with a cold face. The number of Ralph's divine guards was about the same as that of the House of Han's divine guards. However, in terms of team strength, the House of Han had proven itself to be the mightiest in the last battle against the 7th Corps. Back then, the 5th Corps divine guards who had only trained for a year were able to defeat the elite members of the 2nd Corps. Now that so many years had passed and the Han family divine guards had tempered themselves in the 8 Desolation and Torment formation, it was obvious who would emerge victorious in the battle. Chapter 883. The Han family guards were like an invincible, cold sword that pierced towards the 2nd Corps divine guards brought by Ralph. The Han family guards were arranged in small groups of 3 to 5 and a dozen to a large group. They were arranged neatly and orderly. They maintained the most appropriate distance between each other. When charging at Ralph's 2nd Corps divine guards, the Han family guards seemed to have a tacit understanding with each other. They used the most efficient demonic formations to open up a path for them, increasing their offensive strength to the maximum. Wherever their blades pointed, they would unleash an astonishing amount of power. The Han family guards wore indifferent expressions. They calmly searched for their own positions, making sure that every step they took would not make the slightest mistake. If one were to observe from above, one would discover that the distance between each group of Han family guards was astonishingly uniform. There were even larger groups formed between the groups. Those guards with profound strength and outstanding offensive strength were at the outer edge of the formation, acting as the spearhead of the attack. Those guards with slightly weaker strength but cultivated in the elemental energy of earth, water, or other elemental energies stood in the middle. They used their energy to form layers upon layers of boundaries to defend against the attacks coming from the outside. These Han family guards might not be much stronger than the 2nd Corps divine guards in individual strength, but when they banded together and used the energy they were most proficient in at the most opportune moment, the energy they could erupt with would suddenly become terrifying. The 2nd Corps divine guards had taken defensive measures right from the start. As Ralph, Ballins, and Gilbert, who were leading the charge, were obstructed by Sanguiner, Ballins, and Gilbert, and without the 3 high gods to open up a path for them, in addition to the fact that the 2nd Corps divine guards were somewhat fearful of the strength of the Han family guards, they naturally adopted a defensive stance. However, they had clearly underestimated the strength of the Han family guards. Under the cone-shaped assault formation, the defensive walls that the 2nd Corps divine guards hastily formed were as fragile as paper. Upon contact, they were effortlessly torn to shreds. Immediately after, the Han family guards thrust themselves into the middle of the 2nd Corps divine guards. Small and large groups spread out like a lotus flower and reaped the lives of the second core divine guards at the outermost perimeter. The difference in numbers between the two sides wasn't too great. However, when the second core divine guards' attacks landed on the Han family guards, the attacks would be neutralized by the Han family divine guards who were focused on defense. On the other hand, the Han family divine guards who were in charge of killing could focus all their energy on killing the Han family divine guards. With that, a strange phenomenon occurred. The attacks of the second core divine guards would not have any effect on the House of Han. At most, they would cause some injuries to the House of Han, but none of the injuries were fatal. However, when the attacks of the Han family divine guards fell into the middle of the second core divine guards, they would cause great casualties. The lack of coordination between the second core divine guards was immediately exposed. They did not know how to work together. Every time an attack was launched, they would put all their energy into protecting their own lives. It was obvious that their attacks would be ineffective. They were very selfish and would not care about the lives of others. They would even sacrifice their wounded to kill the enemy when a fatal attack was launched. The gap between the two sides was immediately exposed. As time went by, the gap between the two sides grew bigger and bigger. Most of the miserable shrieks and screams were from the second core divine guards. In just a short while, more than 100 of them had died under the bombardment of the Han family guards. The Han family divine guards, on the other hand, only suffered a dozen or so wounded and 2 divine guards were killed. The Han family divine guards who knew how to coordinate and utilize demonic formations to maximize their offensive and defensive strength were far superior to the second core divine guards in terms of teamwork. In this large-scale battle, the Han family divine guards had the absolute upper hand and were slaughtering the second core divine guards one after another. Ralph was tangled up by Sanguiner. Under the frenzied barrage of crimson rays, Ralph felt rather helpless. He did not expect that Sanguiner would possess such formidable strength. Ralph was forced into a passive position right from the start of the battle. Ralph's heart was filled with remorse when he saw his divine guards screaming and screaming. Not only had he underestimated the strength of Sanguiner, Ballins, and the others, but he had also misjudged the situation. He did not expect that not only were the Han family divine guards that escaped from Fort Lossberg not injured, but there were even a few who were exhausted. What the hell is wrong with Hofs and Larrickson? 2 late-stage High God experts and so many Hushvale City divine guards had failed to inflict the slightest damage on the House of Han. What in the world was going on? Ralph cursed and cursed as he watched his divine guards die one after another. He did not know what to do next. Before him, Sanguiner was glaring at him with his blood-red eyes. A broadsword that reeked of blood whizzed through the air, causing the blood in Ralph's body to become chaotic and out of control. Ralph was confident that he could defeat Sanguis. He could see that Sanguis was merely relying on his special energy to destabilize Ralph's blood and his frenzied attacks to gain the upper hand. From Ralph's point of view, Sanguiner was like an arrow at the end of its flight and wouldn't be able to hold on for long. All he needed to do was evade Sanguiner's barrage of attacks for a while before he could defeat Sanguiner with ease. However, Ralph knew that if this went on, the casualties of his subordinates would only increase. If he were to fight Sanguis to the death, he would have to pay a terrible price even if he could defeat Sanguis in the end. Sanguis' frenzied attacks would only increase in number. Ralph did not want to lose his life for the sake of a single Sanguiner. Therefore, he had been silently stalling for time. He would rather let his divine guards die one after another than risk their lives to fight Sanguiner. Ralph, who was silently defending against Sanguiner's barrage of attacks, was looking forward to seeing Lockwood and Wallace's reinforcements. While defending against Sanguiner's attacks, Ralph paid close attention to their movements. Ralph felt a chill run down his spine when he saw what was happening. Lockwood and Wallace's 2 trusted aides were also being obstructed, and from the looks of it, their situation was even worse than Ralph's. Under the frenzied barrage of attacks from Ballins and Gilbert, Lockwood and Wallace's situation was worrying. They were like candles in the wind that could be blown out at any moment. It's no wonder that the House of Han was able to win the last battle. They even said that they didn't send any High Gods to participate in the battle. Ralph cursed in his mind. He did not know that Sanguiner, Ballins, and the others did not possess the strength that they did today. He believed that the reason why the fifth core was able to suppress his second core was because Sanguiner, Gilbert, and Sanguiner were too powerful. I can't let this go on. Otherwise, we will all be finished. After weighing the situation, Ralph decided not to passively take defensive measures anymore. He began to attack without regard for his own life. He began to fight Sanguiner with all his might. After all, Ralph possessed mid-stage high god strength. When he no longer had to be so cautious, when he no longer had a knot in his heart, his strength had improved tremendously. While expending divine energy to stabilize his blood flow, he continued to fight Sanguiner with all his might. With that, Sanguiner could no longer gain the upper hand. He had no choice but to fight even more desperately against Ralph. It did not take long for his body to be covered with wounds. However, for some unknown reason, whenever the wounds caused blood to gush out, Sanguiner felt that the blood in his body became even more vigorous. His broadsword that reeked of blood glowed even brighter. The more he fought, the fiercer he became. Once Hofs, Larrickson, and the others caught up with them, they would not be able to use the demonic formations of the Han family. Every second was critical, and they had no time to waste on Ralph and his party. If Ralph and his party failed to take them down today, Ralph would not be able to escape death when they returned to the City of Shadows to settle the score with Wallace. In their minds, Ralph was no longer a threat to them. He would not be able to stir up any trouble in the future. They decided to spare his life for now, as they would be able to take his life in the future. After hearing Stadholm and Phoebe's words, the Han family guards hastily retreated and formed a defensive formation around Phoebe and Stadholm. Sanguiner, Gilbert, how are you doing? It was at this moment that Emily suddenly cried out. The party stared blankly for a moment and immediately turned their attention to Sanguiner, Bollins, and Gilbert. The three were drenched in sweat after the battle. It was obvious that they had expended a great deal of energy. Sanguiner, in particular, seemed to be supported by an indomitable spirit. When Ralph left, Sanguiner's body was flushed red, and he was gasping for breath. He even staggered. It was only after Sanguiner relaxed that he realized that he had expended a great deal of energy in his desperate attacks. Sanguiner, are you all right? Although Gilbert was also sweating profusely, his expression was relatively normal. He immediately asked with concern when he saw that Sanguiner was in such a state. I'm fine. I'll be fine in a moment. Sanguiner forced a smile. The scarlet broadsword in his hand suddenly flew out and spun at high speed in midair. Strands of bizarre energy were released from Sanguis' broadsword. All of a sudden, the blood of the second core divine guards who died seemed to be attracted by some sort of energy. It turned into strands of blood mist and converged on Sanguis' broadsword. The blood mist slowly condensed into streams of blood that flowed on the broadsword like water. The droplets of blood flew into the air and condensed on the broadsword. The pungent smell of blood in the area was nauseating. Gradually, not a single drop of blood could be seen on the ground. It was at this moment that Sanguiner's broadsword flew back into Sanguiner's hand. Streaks of blood-red radiance passed through the broadsword and entered Sanguiner's body. Sanguiner's eyes, which were extremely weak a moment ago, started to shine brightly. After a while, Sanguiner's previous dejection was swept away, and he became spirited again. Sanguiner let out a light sigh and smilingly said, "All right, I'm fine now. Let's go. We can continue our journey." Stadholm the old monster, Ermite Cotton, Phoebe, and the Han family guards were all dumbstruck. They did not expect that Sanguiner, who was barely able to stand a moment ago, could use such a bizarre method to become spirited and regain his strength. It was simply unimaginable. What's there to be surprised about? Master's strength is not something you can comprehend. Sanguiner is Master's disciple. It's normal for him to recover so quickly. When Gilbert saw that the crowd was staring blankly, he impatiently urged, "Hurry up, hurry up. Do we have to wait for those guys to catch up?" Upon hearing those words, the crowd came back to their senses. They hastily boarded the airship and continued their journey towards the Death Dominion. Chapter 884. At the border of the Darkness and Death Dominions, Ronson Canyon. The Ronson Canyon was the only way from the Darkness Dominion to the Death Dominion. Many god hunters frequented the Ronson Canyon. It was said that the headquarters of the most powerful god hunter factions in the Darkness and Death Dominions were located in Tanai Canyon. Merchants from the Darkness and Death Dominions would only dare to enter the Ronson Canyon after being escorted by a large number of divine guards. But recently, the Ronson Canyon had been much more peaceful than before. It was said that the most powerful god hunter faction in the canyon had left for unknown reasons. With the disappearance of the god hunter faction that wreaked havoc in the Death Dominion, the smaller god hunter factions in the canyon seemed to have quieted down and no longer dared to wreak havoc in the Death Dominion. On this day, a large army arrived at the vast territory of the Ronson Canyon. An enormous flying bat was flying towards the canyon. It was as though a huge dark cloud had blotted out the sky. Figures could be seen on the flying bat. The cold eyes of the guards were glowing with a frightening light. They were vigilantly scanning the forest around them for enemies that might suddenly appear. We have finally arrived at the Ronson Canyon. Once we cross the Ronson Canyon, we will be in the territory of the Death Dominion. Hoffs and Larrickson will not dare to enter the Death Dominion and wreak havoc there. Once we cross the canyon, we will be met by our allies in the Death Dominion. Statholm heaved a sigh of relief. He had been too tense and worried about Larrickson, Hoffs, and the others. He did not dare to relax for even a moment. Do not let your guard down. The Ronson Canyon is located at the border of the Darkness and Death Dominions. God hunters are rampant in this area. Ballins had served in Erebus Third Corps for several years and knew a thing or two about the Ronson Canyon. He knew that Tanai Canyon had several god hunter factions that were wreaking havoc in the Darkness and Death Dominions. God hunters? Gilbert put on a disdainful smile and said, "With our Han family's current strength, why should we be afraid of those useless god hunters? It's best if they don't come. Otherwise, we'll just kill them and bury them." Don't boast. Ballins shot a cold glance at Gilbert and groaned. If it's just a god hunter faction, there's nothing to worry about. If it's an alliance formed by a few god hunter factions, we won't be able to escape easily. After taking a short pause, as though to warn Gilbert, Ballins continued, "In Tanai, there is a group of god hunters running rampant in Ronson Gorge. Even to this day, not many know who their leader is. They dare to attack any traveling merchants, even those protected by a large number of divine guards. This god hunter faction is very famous in the Ronson Canyon. All the cities in the Death Dominion have dispatched many divine guards to encircle them, but to no avail. They have been running amok in the Ronson Canyon for decades. No ordinary family clan can contend against them." After hearing Ballins's words, Gilbert's expression turned grave. He put away his frivolous attitude and asked in astonishment, "Who could be so powerful?" Ballins shook his head and said in an indifferent manner, "I've told you, not many know who their leader is. Perhaps only those who are also god hunters know his name and identity. However, it is said that the leader is very young. He cultivates in the energy of death and wields a 3-meter-long bone spear. What a powerful fella. I wonder if he is stronger than Sanguiner," muttered Gilbert as he glanced at Sanguiner from the corner of his eyes. "Even if Sanguiner has the strength, he doesn't have the talent to be a leader," said Ballins as he looked at Sanguiner. "Who said so? Hee. After hearing your boasting, I really want to meet him." Sanguiner's strength had been advancing by leaps and bounds recently. Now, he no longer cared about many people. He was very displeased that Ballins was bragging about a young man. He did not think that he was inferior to anyone else. "We better pray that we don't run into him. Otherwise, we might not even make it out of the Ronson Canyon alive," said Ballins in an indifferent manner. He did not seem to be affected by Sanguiner's words. "Everyone, be careful. Larrickson and Hoffs aren't the kind of people who would give up easily. Ralph won't give up so easily either. The Ronson Canyon is vast, and we can't afford to stay here any longer. We must leave as soon as possible." Emily was not interested in the conversation between Sanguiner and Ballins. All she was thinking about was how to bring the Han family members to safety. There was a waterfall in the Ronson Canyon. Behind the waterfall were a dozen or so caves of various sizes. In each cave, there were human heads moving about. In the largest cave supported by 3 small energy towers, a dozen or so god hunter leaders were having a discussion in low voices. Their eyes glinted with ferocious glints. We have found out that those people are from the Han family of the City of Shadows. The Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in the Death, Destruction, and Darkness Dominions now belongs to the Han family. Quincy, one of the god hunter leaders, was beaming with joy. He greedily encouraged the other god hunter leaders. The Celestial Pearl Pharmacy is rich and powerful. This is a big piece of juicy meat. My men have observed that the Han family guards cultivate in all kinds of energies. Not only will we be able to obtain energy from them, but we will also be able to get their black crystal coins. Hee, do you want to join forces? The power displayed by the House of Han's airship was not to be underestimated. There was no way a single god hunter faction could take them down. Therefore, the leaders of all the major god hunters in Ronson Canyon had gathered in this cave to discuss whether or not they should join forces to take down the House of Han. This is a deal. Another god hunter leader, Krisen, put on a sinister smile and said, the Han family's reputation is not well known. The fact that they left the City of Shadows means that they are in dire straits. If we join forces, we can definitely take them down. Hee, count me in. Count me in too. Count me in too. I'm joining in too. The god hunter leaders who had come to the Ronson Canyon had the intention of joining forces to take down the Han family. Under the instigation of Quincy, the most powerful god hunter leader in the Ronson Canyon, they declared that the Han family that had entered the Ronson Canyon would be their prey. Have you all forgotten someone? Suddenly, a discordant voice sounded. Scarlet, one of the god hunter leaders, slightly bunched her willowy brows. She asked hesitantly, but that guy's surname is Han, isn't it? The Han surname isn't common. Could he be related to the Han family? Scarlet was the only female among the god hunter leaders. Her rather delicate face had 2 crisscross scars that made this woman, who was supposed to be beautiful, look hideous. Even though she had a voluptuous and alluring body, most men would avoid her due to her unflattering face. Scarlet cultivated in the energy of death and possessed early-stage high god strength. She was neither weak nor strong among the god hunter leaders. However, due to her outstanding intelligence, the force she led had never suffered any major losses. After hearing Scarlet's words, the god hunter leaders who had just agreed to the deal bunched their brows. It was obvious that they knew who Scarlet was talking about. Krisen hesitated for a moment before he said in a deep voice, "It can't be that coincidental, right? I have never heard of that guy having any family or friends. But if he really is related to the Han family, we will have to reconsider our decision." Quincy's face turned cold and he replied, "That's right. That guy used to be the strongest expert in the Ronson Canyon, but he is no longer in the canyon. Moreover, his followers had clearly stated that they would no longer meddle in the affairs of the Ronson Canyon. Besides, he has never mentioned that he is from the Han family and he is no longer in the Ronson Canyon. What are you worried about?" "You're right. We are indeed overthinking. He shouldn't be related to the Han family." Krisen put on an embarrassed smile and said, "We are just scaring ourselves. Hee, the plan remains the same. I'm in." "That's right." Quincy burst into laughter. He looked at Scarlet impatiently and said, "Women are always so fussy. If you don't want to be a part of this, just leave. Without your followers, they won't affect the overall situation. We can still get a little more." Scarlet put on a gloomy face. Each of them vigilantly observed their surroundings. Then, they quickly moved into formation on the flying bat. Emily, Phoebe, and the others looked around nervously and shouted, "Everyone, be careful. Get ready for battle." "There's no need. There's only one person, and it's a woman." Sanguiner saw that the Han family guards on the airship were on high alert because of his shout. He laughed and said, "Don't be nervous. That woman isn't particularly strong. I can handle her." The guards heaved a sigh of relief after hearing his words. They were curious as to why a woman would come alone at this time. Tanai did not know anyone in the Ronson Canyon, and it was obvious that a woman could not cause any harm to them. So what was she doing here? After a while, Scarlet gradually appeared from a stone forest in the distance. She wore a cold and stern expression. Huh. Before Scarlet could approach, Fanny, Lisa, and the other ladies on the airship exclaimed in surprise. They were all frightened by the two hideous-looking scars on Scarlet's face. Halt! Shouted Ballins coldly. His killing intent condensed and locked on to Scarlet. Scarlet was startled. She did not expect that Ballins would release such an intense killing intent just by looking at her. Scarlet felt a chill in her heart. She thought that the Han family was not as weak as Quincy had described them to be. Ballins alone possessed high god strength. I wonder if there's someone stronger? Scarlet was about to speak when she suddenly raised her willowy eyebrows. She stared at Ballins with bright eyes. She sensed a trace of very strange energy from Ballins. She had also sensed that energy from another person, and that person was even stronger. There must be a connection. Scarlet was almost immediately convinced of her conjecture. She stopped on the spot, raised her hand to indicate that she meant no harm. Then, she hastily asked, "Do you know Han Hao?" Han Hao? Who's Han Hao? I don't know him. Who are you? Who's Han Hao? Statholm and the other members of the Han family were astounded. They looked at Scarlet in puzzlement and wondered if there was something wrong with this woman. Why would she rush over to ask such an unreliable question? Scarlet was stunned when she heard that the members of the Han family did not know Han Hao. She thought, am I being overly suspicious? But that old man's energy is very similar to that of Han Hao. How can I explain that? We don't know the person you are talking about. Please don't stand in our way, said Statholm with a faint smile. Although he spoke politely, he was repeatedly signaling to Ballins with his eyes that if you don't leave now, don't blame us for being rude. Then I'm sorry. I'll be on my way. Having been a god hunter for so many years, Scarlet was very good at reading people's expressions. She immediately understood the situation. She thought, since this has nothing to do with Han Hao, I don't have to worry about your lives. Wait. It was at this moment that Gilbert seemed to recall something. He rubbed his head and said, I think I've heard this name before. Let me think. The members of the Han family looked at Gilbert in puzzlement. Ballins did not attack Scarlet immediately. Scarlet looked at Gilbert suspiciously and tried to remind him. Han Hao cultivates in the energy of death. He carries a 3-meter-long bone spear in his hand, and there are 7 spears on his back. Gilbert's eyes lit up as he finally remembered. He cried out in surprise, it's him. Not only Gilbert, but Emily, Phoebe, and Fanny had also seen Little Skull Han Hao. Although they did not know that Han Hao had given himself a name, they knew who she was talking about when Scarlet mentioned that Han Hao had 7 bone spears on his back. I think we know who you are talking about. Emily looked at Scarlet with a puzzled expression. She smilingly asked, is there anything I can help you with? Is Han Hao a member of the Han family? Asked Scarlet. Emily thought for a moment and found it hard to define. However, she knew that Han Shua and Little Skull were very close. It seemed that Han Hao was a member of the Han family. After thinking for a moment, Emily smilingly said, you can say that. That's great. Scarlet hastily said, the god hunters of the Ronson Canyon have joined forces to attack the Han family. I don't think you will be able to handle so many of them. You'd better retreat from the Ronson Canyon at once. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Upon hearing those words, Emily, Statholm, and the others' faces jolted. Statholm anxiously asked, how did you know? I am a god hunter leader myself. I came to warn you because I know Han Hao, replied Scarlet anxiously. I have already sent people to inform Han Hao's followers, but I don't know if they will make it in time. Their followers are all over the Ronson Canyon. As long as you are in the canyon, Tanai will not be able to escape their eyes and ears. They know this place too well. You must leave at once. We can't retreat. Phoebe put on a bitter smile. If they were to retreat now, they might run into Hoff's and Lerickson's followers. They were no better than the god hunters. Thank you for your warning. We can only leave the Ronson Canyon as fast as we can. Hopefully, we will be able to escape the god hunters' pursuit. They did not waste any more words. They did not even ask about the relationship between Scarlet and Han Hao. They hastily took off again. Chapter 885. The Ronson Canyon was more than 10 days away from the Death Dominion. They had no other choice but to leave the Ronson Canyon as fast as they could. Although Gilbert, Emily, and the others were puzzled as to why this malevolent-looking woman knew Little Skull Han Hao, they thought that as Han Shua's summoned creature, Little Skull should have stayed in the Netherworld and should not have appeared on Elysium. As time was of the essence, they did not have the time to ask Scarlet about Little Skull Han Hao. In their minds, Han Hao was not a very important person. After all, a summoned creature was just a summoned creature. As they had never seen Han Hao in person, they could never understand how terrifying Han Hao was. Scarlet understood their anxiety and did not stop them. After seeing the airship of the Han family fly past her, Scarlet hesitated for a moment before she secretly followed behind the airship of the Han family. As one of the leaders of the Ronson Canyon God Hunters, Scarlet knew better than the Han family how powerful the God Hunter factions were in the Ronson Canyon. As long as the members of the Han family were in the Ronson Canyon, Tanai, Quincy, and the others would be able to track them in no time. Quincy and the others had been roaming the Ronson Canyon for many years and knew the geography of the canyon like the back of their hands. Since he had contacted so many factions to deal with the Han family, he would not allow the Han family to escape his grasp. Scarlet's speculation was proven to be correct. 3 days later, when the Han family's airship was about to fly above a mountain peak that pierced through the clouds, they discovered that the mountain peak was densely packed with burly men with sinister expressions and ferocious glints in their eyes. The crowd on the mountain peak kept a short distance from each other. It was obvious that they did not belong to a single faction, but a group of many different factions. The eyes of those leading the group were filled with greed as they stared fixedly at the approaching house of Han. Some of them were swallowing their saliva in an unnatural manner. The corners of their mouths curved into cruel smiles. It was obvious at a glance that they were god hunters who loved to kill. Before the Han family's airship could get close, the god hunters who had been waiting on the mountain peak for some time flew into the air. The leaders of the god hunters deployed their domains of divinity and formed layers of boundaries on the mountain peak to stop the airship. In front of the layers of barriers, the Han clan's flying bats were forced to stop. "What the hell are you scums doing?" Gilbert knew that they must be up to no good since they were blocking his way. As soon as he stepped forward, he yelled, "Get out of my way!" There were a dozen or so god hunter factions in the Ronson Canyon, blocking the Han family's airship. Each faction had at least a few dozen god hunters. Quincy's faction had the largest number of god hunters, numbering more than 300. The dozen or so god hunter factions had gathered together, numbering around 1,300 in total. Most of their leaders possessed high god strength. With such a pack of jackals blocking their way, the future of the Han family was bleak. Quincy paid no heed to Gilbert's shouts. He stood together with the other god hunter leaders and lecherously laughed at Phoebe, Emily, and Fanny. From time to time, he would point at Jasper, Lisa, and the others and let out strange, complacent laughter. No matter if it was Phoebe, Emily, Jasper, or Lisa, they were all the kind of beauties that could only be found 1 in 100. Under the effects of Han Shua's rebirth pills, their skin was fair and translucent, preserving the most beautiful moment of a woman. Anyone who saw them would be stunned by their beauty. God hunters lived on the edge of a knife and sought all kinds of thrills. It was only natural for them to have a strong desire for beautiful women. Beautiful women such as Phoebe and Emily were fatally attractive to them. For a moment, they almost forgot their main objective. From the perspective of Quincy and the other god hunters, the Han family's guards were nothing to be afraid of. Most importantly, they did not discover any high god experts among the Han family's troops. Even though the Han family's forces were large in number, they were nothing in their eyes. Hee, I want that woman. A woman as ripe as a honey peach is the most delicious. Haha, no one is allowed to snatch her from me. Kristen pointed at Emily and put on a lascivious smile, as though they could take everything from the Han family. That little beauty is mine. She's my type. Quincy pointed at the panic-stricken Lisa, put on a mischievous smile, and said, "Brothers, take a good look. Let's divide the spoils of war." TSK, they are much better than that slut Scarlet. Not only are their figures top-notch, but they are also so good-looking that they can make anyone drool. All right, let's divide the women first before talking about the other spoils of war. It seems that we will have a good time today. Another godhunter leader said with a lascivious smile. He did not take the Han family seriously at all. Ever since the Han family arrived on Elysium, they had never suffered such humiliation. Sanguiner, Bollins, Gilbert, and the others were so enraged that their lungs were about to explode. Emily, Phoebe, and the other ladies who were singled out by the godhunter leaders wanted nothing more than to hack those godhunter leaders into 1,000 pieces. However, both Emily and Phoebe knew that they had no chance of winning against the dozen or so ferocious high gods and more than 1,000 godhunters. Gilbert, Sanguiner, and the others were about to charge out when they saw that their matriarch was being humiliated. However, they were stopped by Emily's anxious gaze. Phoebe put on an ashen face and said in a cold voice, "We are members of the Han family of the City of Shadows. We are on good terms with the major family clans of the Death Dominion. If you dare to cause trouble for us, you will be surrounded and annihilated by the divine guards of the Darkness and Death Dominions. Everyone, if you are willing to let us pass, we can offer you 5 million black crystal coins. What do you think?" "Haha, who do you think you are trying to scare?" Quincy raised his head and laughed. He said, "Don't you know who we are? What kind of business do we do? Hee, we are god hunters, and this is what we do. If we were afraid of the divine guards of the two dominions, we would have quit a long time ago. Let's not waste our breath on them. These women are making our hearts itch. How can we just watch them leave before our eyes?" said Crizin as he rubbed his hands impatiently. Wait. It was at this moment that Scarlet flew out from the back of the airship. She took a glance at Quincy and the others and hastily said, "I have asked them. They know Han Hao. You better not act rashly." The godhunter leaders were stunned when they heard those words. Some of them who were very afraid of Han Hao started to hesitate. It seemed that they wanted to retreat. Even Quincy and Crisin's faces jolted. It seemed that even though Han Hao had left the Ronson Canyon, the two were still very wary of Han Shua. "Scarlet, don't be an alarmist," Quincy angrily rebuked and said. "Who would believe their words? Humph. Han Hao has been in the Ronson Canyon for so many years, and I have never seen him have any relatives or friends. Don't think that just because the family name is Han, they have anything to do with Han Hao. Who do you think you are trying to scare?" "I have asked them. They said that Han Hao is indeed a member of the Han family." Scarlet looked at Quincy with cold eyes and said in a sinister voice, "Think about Han Hao's ruthlessness. Given Han Hao's personality, if he finds out who touched one of his people, no one will be able to escape his wrath. Han Hao has run amok in the Ronson Canyon for so many years, and never once has he suffered a loss. Even those major family clans from the Death Dominion who killed Han Hao's subordinates did not manage to survive until now." The eyes of the leaders of the smaller factions flickered incessantly after hearing Scarlet's words. It seemed that Han Hao's influence in the Ronson Canyon was so great that they were starting to panic after hearing Scarlet's words. "Cut the crap, you be *T. Quincy had been suppressed by Han Hao's forces in the Ronson Canyon for a long time. Now that Han Hao had left the Ronson Canyon with his subordinates, Quincy was very annoyed by people mentioning Han Hao. "Those people are trying to scare us with Han Hao's name. Don't fall for it. You all know that Han Hao doesn't have any relatives. Let's settle this as soon as possible. Think about it. The Han family has so many beauties and so much wealth. Today, they will all be ours." Quincy continued to persuade. Perhaps Quincy's explanation worked, or perhaps the god hunters were bewitched by the beauties and wealth of the Han family. The god hunter leaders encouraged themselves. They waved their hands and commanded their subordinates to surround the Han family airship from all directions. Scarlet knew that it was useless for her to say anything now that things had come to this stage. She sighed helplessly. She knew that she wouldn't be able to escape if she persisted. She had no choice but to retreat silently. At this moment, A battle was about to break out. Everyone, it's quite lively here. A shrill, cold laughter sounded from the distance. A burly man whose upper body was covered with scars walked towards them. He cultivated in the Edict of Destruction and was only a late-stage mid-god. His strength was inferior to any of the God Hunter leaders. However, the arrival of such a person caused the God Hunter leaders to turn grave. "Cisco, haven't you all left the Ronson Canyon?" said one of the God Hunter leaders with a big smile on his face. His previous domineering demeanor was nowhere to be seen as he spoke to Sita, whose strength was one level lower than his. Quincy and Krizen's expressions were very unnatural. They bunched their brows and looked at Cisco, who shouldn't be here. Quincy put on a gloomy face and asked, "Cisco, you should be in the fringe with your leader. Why are you still in the Ronson Canyon?" Cisco laughed maniacally and coldly replied, "Since when did you have the right to interfere in our business?" After taking a short pause, Cisco took a glance at the members of the Han family on the airship and said to the God Hunter leaders, "Our leader has given us an order not to touch the Han family. He also forbade us from touching the Han family. I don't know why our leader would give us such a strange order, but since it is our leader's order, we must obey it." "Cisco, you have already left the Ronson Canyon. Why are you still meddling in other people's business?" Krizen's face turned cold and said, "Besides, who do you think you can stop? What gives you the right to be so presumptuous here?" Han Hao is not here. Do you think you can overturn the heavens?" Cisco's eyes glinted with ferocity. He put on a hideous smile and said, "We are all in this line of work. Do you think I don't know his temper? I've already informed my brothers of the situation before I came here. If I'm not mistaken, they should be rushing towards the fringe right now. You can kill me today. I'm prepared to die at any moment in this line of work. But I believe you all know my leader's temper. Do as you see fit." The God Hunter leaders' faces jolted upon hearing those words. They did not expect Cisco to have another trick up his sleeve. They knew that even if they killed Cisco and the members of the Han family, Han Hao would know about it. "Since Han Hao has spoken, I will not participate." After a long moment of silence, one of the God Hunter leaders forced a smile and said to Cisco, "When you see Han Hao, send him my regards. Tell him that I, Long, will never make an enemy out of him." Of course, replied Cisco with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I have to give face to Han Hao." "Quincy, I'm sorry, but I will not participate," said another God Hunter leader who had given up. Han Hao treated me well back in the Ronson Canyon. I will not attack his people." One after another, the God Hunter leaders decided to retreat at the most crucial moment. They reluctantly suppressed the thought of attacking the House of Han and hastily left with their men after informing Shidan of the situation. In the blink of an eye, only Quincy and Krizen were left standing in front of the Han family's airship. They could only watch helplessly as the God Hunter leaders left. They cursed Han Hao countless times in their minds. On the airship, Gilbert, Emily, Fanny, and the others looked at one another in astonishment. They had no idea what was going on. When did that little skull come to the Ronson Canyon? Why are those fugitives so afraid of him? Ballins was the only one who suddenly realized something. He softly exclaimed, "So it's him." "Who?" asked Sanguiner and Gilbert simultaneously. Ballins put on a surprised face and reminded, "Do you remember that mysterious youngster I mentioned to you? He is the most powerful God Hunter in the Ronson Canyon. To this day, not many know where he came from. I did not expect him to be one of us." "It can't be wrong." Dark Dragon Gilbert put on a bitter smile and said, "That youngster has been very powerful for a long time. I did not expect him to be so influential in the Ronson Canyon." "Quincy, Krizen, do you two really want to fight my leader?" Shitan looked at Quincy and Krizen and sneered, I advise you to give up. I will pretend that this never happened. Or else, you know the consequences." "Damn it, I don't believe this." Quincy seemed to have been angered by Shitan's arrogance. He angrily shouted, "If Han Hao were here, perhaps I would give him face. You are just a goddamned mid-god, and you dare to talk nonsense in front of me? If Han Hao goes to the fringe, Who knows if he can come back alive? But even if he does, I'll just give up on the Ronson Canyon. Let's go and get rid of this Shiten first. Krizin had originally wanted to retreat, but when he saw the women on the Han family's airship, he was blinded by lust. He waved his hand and commanded, "Kill them." Chapter 886. If it weren't for Chitin's presence, there would be far more God Hunter leaders than just Quincy and Krizin. If more than a dozen God Hunter factions were to gang up on the House of Han, the threat of more than a dozen High Gods would have put the House of Han in grave danger. However, with Little Skull and Han Hao's influence in the Ronson Canyon, those faction leaders had no choice but to withdraw from the Han family out of fear of Han Hao's strength. With that, they would only have to face Quincy and Krizin's factions. Quincy and Krizin's factions had around 500 people in total. Among them, Quincy and Krizin were mid-stage High Gods. They were one of the most powerful factions in the Ronson Canyon. However, the Han family was not afraid of these two factions. Just as the other faction leaders left, Gilbert, Sanguiner, and the others who had been holding back could no longer hold back. Just as Quincy and Krizin issued their orders, they suddenly discovered that the Han family's guards were charging at them. It was easy to tell if an expert was skilled or not. When the Han family's guards flew towards them from the airship, Quincy and Krizin's faces slightly changed. They were startled and they anxiously shouted, "Motherfucker, be careful." The Han family's guards were arranged in neat and orderly formations. Each group of guards maintained an appropriate distance from each other so as to not affect the efficiency of their attacks. The ice-cold eyes of the Han family's guards told Quincy and Krizin that the Han family's guards were definitely seasoned veterans. They were not rookies who had never experienced the cruelty of battle. Therefore, Quincy and Krizin immediately noticed that the Han family's guards were extraordinary. They immediately ordered their subordinates to attack with all they had. However, Quincy and Krizin had underestimated the strength of the Han family's guards. The Han family's guards had not wasted their years of training in the 8 Desolation and Torment formation. Baptized in blood and fire, the Han family's guards were even more ferocious and cold-blooded than the God Hunters. When they attacked, they were like sharp blades that could cut through anything. They stabbed right into the center of the God Hunters. The same scene as the battle between Ralph's second Corps Divine guards played out once again. The Han family guards had the upper hand in terms of numbers and teamwork. As soon as they came into contact with the Han family guards, their terrifying battle prowess was on full display. The God Hunters who had been wreaking havoc in the Ronson Canyon were forced to retreat again and again. The Han family guards slaughtered their way through the God Hunters like a hot knife through butter. There was not a single place that could withstand the God Hunters' attacks. Wherever they passed, the God Hunters would scream in despair and agony. One after another, mangled corpses were sent flying and fell from the sky to the peak below. Scarlet and Chitin were dumbfounded. When they saw Quincy and Krizin giving the order to attack, they thought that they were done for. Chitin was blaming herself for being too bossy and domineering just now. But before she could ponder any further, she was astonished to discover that the ones who attacked first weren't Quincy and Krizin's God Hunters, but those Han family guards that she knew nothing about. It was only after the battle started that Chitin realized what was going on. She finally understood why Han Hao had ordered her not to attack the Han family guards. Most people wouldn't be able to see through the intricate and profound battle formation of the Han family guards. But as a direct subordinate of Little Skull, Han Hao, Chitin had seen Han Hao's demonic battle formation. With just one glance, she understood that the battle formation used by the Han family guards was similar to the one she was familiar with. When one of Scarlet's subordinates passed the information to Chitin, Chitin didn't quite believe that Han Hao had anything to do with the Han family. But after seeing the battle formation of the Han family guards, she was the first to believe in Scarlet's judgment. Compared to Chitin, the combat strength of the House of Han had a greater impact on Scarlet. She watched in astonishment as the House of Han pierced into Quincy and Krizin's hands, as though they were nothing more than divine weapons. She watched in astonishment as the House of Han pierced into Quincy and Krizin's hands and slaughtered the God Hunters. Han family, Han Hao, they are indeed mysterious characters. Scarlet mumbled to herself in astonishment. Quincy and Crizin felt as though they were going crazy. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect that the Han family guards would be so terrifying. Each and every one of the guards was using a profound battle formation to harvest the lives of Quincy and Crizin's subordinates. Quincy and Crizin wanted to lend a hand, but they were firmly entangled by Sanguiner, Bollins, and Gilbert. By now, Quincy and Crizin were completely convinced that the Han family had a complicated relationship with Han Hao. This was because Han Hao's subordinates knew a thing or two about the battle formation of the Han family guards. Furthermore, the battle formation used by Sanguiner, Bollins, and Gilbert faintly resembled that of Han Hao. Before the battle began, Quincy and Crizin did not see any high god in the Han family guards. But as soon as the battle began, the sudden appearance of Sanguiner, Bollins, and Gilbert gave them a huge surprise. They suddenly discovered that those unknown and insignificant characters had suddenly transformed into ferocious monsters. Quincy and Crizin were filled with regret. They cursed themselves for provoking the members of the Han family when they knew that Han Hao is unfathomable and mysterious. You're still yelling? Why aren't you yelling? Motherfucker, didn't you say a lot of bullshit just now? You old dog, I'm going to skin you alive today. You motherfucker. How dare you have any improper thoughts about our mistress? I'm going to break your D***CK right now. Unlike the silent Sanguiner and Bollins, Gilbert never closed his mouth when he attacked Crizin together with Bollins. His venomous words were constantly spewing out of his mouth. They were not any weaker than his ferocious attacks. Quincy was held back by Sanguiner while Crizin was held back by Gilbert and Bollins. Bollins did not utter a single word. Instead, he launched a flying sword that was filled with murderous intent, forcing Crizin to focus most of his energy on defending against Bollins' attacks. Gilbert circled around Crizin like a ghost, attacking him at the most opportune moments and cursing all of Crizin's ancestors with his filthy mouth. Sometimes, the mental torment was no less painful than the physical pain. Crizin felt as though he would collapse at any moment under Gilbert's annoying curses, sarcasm, and sarcasm. Unable to focus, Crizin's attacks were greatly reduced. Bollins took advantage of the situation and inflicted a few more wounds on Crizin's body with his flying sword. Kill them. Phoebe shouted coldly when she saw that Han Hao's side had gained the upper hand. Phoebe hated Quincy and Crizin very much because the two of them looked at her with obscene expressions and insulted Emily, Lisa, and the other girls. Phoebe could not bear it any longer. Just a moment ago, Phoebe had been suppressing her anger because she was weaker than the other two. But now that the Han family guards had gained the upper hand, Phoebe could no longer hold back her anger. Be it Phoebe, Emily, Statholm, or Ermike, these talented individuals from Profound Continent had made rapid progress in their cultivation on Elysium, a place rich in elemental energies. In the Han family, they were supported by ample wealth. Scrolls of profound energy, pellets personally refined by Han Shuo, and divine essences of various elements purchased from various regions. These items kept appearing in the Han family's important storehouse and were distributed by Phoebe, Emily, and the others to the core members of the Han family. These members of the Han family, who were all heroes of Profound Continent, had access to everything that could help them in their cultivation on Elysium. In addition to their outstanding talents, although their progress was not as fast as that of Sanguiner, Bollins, and the others, they had made rapid progress. By now, most of Phoebe, Emily, and the others had broken through to the mid-god realm. Talented individuals such as Statholm and Ermike had entered the late-stage mid-god realm. Their progress was much faster than those gods who were born and bred on Elysium. These people were able to become top-notch experts on Profound Continent, a place where elemental energies were scarce, and they barely understood the various elements. After coming to Elysium, they had access to all the convenient resources available to them. It was only natural that they would make rapid progress in their cultivation. Phoebe, Emily, Statholm the Old Monster, Ermike, and the others weren't idling around. They were familiar with Han Shuo's demonic formations. They arranged themselves into formations with astonishing destructive power and attacked the god hunters under Quincy and Crizin's command, constantly inflicting damage to them. The situation was completely one-sided. The first one to suffer was Crizin. He finally lost his mind after hearing Gilbert's malicious curses. He was so focused on attacking Gilbert that he forgot himself. Crizin, who had lost his mind, had forgotten about Balin's. When his attack finally landed on Gilbert, Balin's flying sword pierced through his nape and protruded from his forehead. Crizin died on the spot. Idiot. I may not have outstanding offensive power like Sanguiner and Balin's, but my body is tough. Do you really think you can kill me with one strike? Idiot. Gilbert staggered and coughed a few times before he regained his composure. He stepped forward and kicked Crizin's dead body, sending him crashing to the mountain peak below. Gilbert's new body was meticulously forged by Han Shuo using the method of refining demonic weapons. Although his body's defensive power was not as freakishly strong as Han Shuo's, it was at least a dozen times tougher than an ordinary god's. Had it been anyone else, even Balin's, they would have been severely injured if not killed by Crizin's attack. However, Gilbert was fine. "All right, Gilbert, hurry up and join forces with Sanguiner to kill the other one," said Balin's as he wiped the flying sword in his hand before he turned around and charged at Quincy. Gilbert spat on the ground and spat on Crizin's corpse. "Damn it, you're lucky." After cursing again, Gilbert turned around and charged at Quincy. He planned to join forces with Balin's and Sanguiner to kill Quincy as soon as possible. Under Sanguin's relentless attacks, Quincy was at his wits' end. He was heavily encircled by the House of Han guards. Whenever he tried to break free from the encirclement, he would discover that the House of Han guards would frantically attack him. Although Quincy possessed formidable strength, the full-powered attacks of 100 mid-gods were not to be underestimated. Not to mention, there was also Sanguiner, a reckless and ruthless character. There was no way he could escape from this place. The moment Crizin died, Quincy's heart turned cold. He knew that he was done for. As expected, Balin's and Gilbert did not have the resolve to fight fair and square. They immediately surrounded Quincy, causing him to feel even more despair. "Even if I'm going to die, I'm going to drag someone down with me," said Quincy hatefully in his heart. As a god hunter, he did not know if he would live to see the light of day. Every god hunter's hands were stained with blood. As the leader of the god hunters, Quincy dared to offend Little Skull, Han Hao, and even attack the Han family. It was clear that he was not someone who feared death. The moment Balin's and Gilbert surrounded him, Quincy knew that he would not be able to escape death. Ruthless people had their own plans. He was prepared to perish together with his enemies. "Everyone, spread out. This guy wants to drag someone down with him. All right, keep some distance from him. We will slowly wear him down." Stratholme, the old monster, glanced at Quincy and saw through his bloodthirsty eyes. Having roamed the profound continent for so many years, Stratholme, the old monster's eyes were very sharp. With his reminder, not only Balin's and Gilbert, but even Sanguiner, who was entangled with Quincy, immediately retreated a distance away. "Motherf asterisk cur. You want to perish together? Hee, that won't happen." Gilbert arrived again. His mouth once again began to play its venomous role. A series of curses and insults were spewed out from his mouth. Sanguiner, Balin's, and some of the Han family guards in the distance were bombarding Quincy with all sorts of attacks. Quincy was on the verge of vomiting blood. He discovered that he had been deprived of the opportunity to perish together with his enemies. He could only helplessly face all sorts of attacks in despair. In the end, Quincy failed to escape his fate of being surrounded and killed. The attacks led by Sanguiner, Balin's, and Gilbert drained Quincy's strength bit by bit. Eventually, Quincy ran out of divine energy and was beaten to death with a sky full of divine weapons. Quincy's death was extremely depressing. His body was pierced by all sorts of bizarre divine weapons and hung in midair. It was only when Sanguiner was certain that Quincy had run out of blood that the party swarmed forward and added a few more divine weapons. They dismembered Quincy and threw his body parts all over the place. After Quincy and Crizin's deaths, the god hunters who were fortunate enough to have escaped from the House of Han fled like headless chickens. They fled into the mountains and forests, disregarding everything else as they tried to get out of this perilous place. Chiton and Scarlet, who were watching from a distance, were astonished to see Crizin and Quincy killed one after another. They had no idea how they should deal with the Han family. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.